wherein we invite eminent personalities from supply chain sectors to a common platform where they discuss their ideas. These ideas provide much required impetus to our budding managers to get insights about the industry and bridge the gap between theory and practice. In the last 2 years, the global supply chain has undergone massive disruption. Initially, because of the unprecedented pandemic, and now because of the war waged between two great nations, Russia and Ukraine. Businesses have been facing challenges such as increased lead times, increased transportation costs, and many more. This leads us to the theme for this year, Smart Supply Chain Navigating the Future. A smart supply chain attempts to bring visibility and transparency to supply chain and makes it robust with the help of IoT, artificial intelligence, and advanced analytics. It aids in predictive maintenance, real-time monitoring, and smart warehouses. We would begin the conference with our director, Dr. Raman Ramchandra Sir's address. Due to some organizational obligations, he could not be present here in person. However, we have a video of his welcome remarks, which we will be playing here.
Distinguished speakers, fellow faculty members, students, members of the FORSE committee who has organized this conference. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this very interesting and apt theme of smart supply chain navigating the future. As many of you would know, I spent over 3 decades in the chemical industry. Chemical industry is perhaps one of the industries whose supply chains have been globally integrated, globally spread out for a very long time. Let me give you a very interesting example. India is one of the largest exporters of castor oil. The castor oil exported from India goes to China, where through a chemical process it gets converted into sebacic acid. And the sebacic acid is then exported to Europe and North America, where many specialty chemical companies use that as a raw material for production of ingredients that go into jet fuel, ingredients that go into automobile lubricants, and even for some personal care products. In addition to that, in the last about 20 years, or 2 decades, manufacture of many of the basic chemicals and even intermediates, advanced intermediates, and even to great extent, finished products moved to China. The risks of such an extreme concentration of your supply chain strategy in one geography or one country started to become evident as early as 2007, 2008, in the weeks and months leading up to the Beijing Olympics in 2008. The Chinese government, in order to prepare for the Beijing Olympics, cracked down on a number of polluting industries. Consequently, many such raw material producers and who were the backbone of industry across the world were shut down. And due to this supply-demand dynamics, costs of various intermediates and even finished products shot up, some of them 2 times and 3 times. Fortunes were made and fortunes were lost during this time. The COVID pandemic further accentuated or underscored the importance or the risk associated with concentration of supply chain. In the last 2.5, 3 years, there is almost no industry that has not been unaffected because of the pandemic and because of higher concentration of the supply chain strategies with one or two countries. Apple, the model of business excellence in the last couple of quarters, have been reporting lower than the reported sales of their iPhones and iPads because their production in Foxconn in China has been disrupted due to COVID and due to COVID-related unrest. A more telling example is what's happening in Europe today because of the Ukraine war. The company that I worked for 22 years, BSF, which has a 150-year-old large manufacturing plant set in an area which is about one-fourth of the size of Mumbai, which produces about 8,000 products, which goes into a number of industries from automobiles to agriculture, today faces the risk and the probability of a shutdown because they have completely relied for their energy on the gas coming from Russia. With the ongoing Ukraine war and the political positioning and the kind of restrictions that NATO is putting on various European companies, BASF today seriously faces this risk of shutting down some of their plants. Such are the variables that supply chain professionals today have to contend with. In addition to that, any supply chain decision today cannot also escape the prism of sustainability and the need to look at what is the kind of carbon emission that your strategy is going to come up with, because these terms like sustainability and net zero, which were fashionable terms about 10, 15 years ago, have now become table stakes. I was at a recent conference where the head of the supply chain of Hindustan Unilever was talking about how they have measured their carbon emissions and have found out that right now more than 70% of their emissions actually come from activities outside their factory and outside their office premises. In other words, this large chunk of the carbon emission associated with the company is actually related to supply chain activities outside of the premise of the factory. And they are seriously looking at how to reduce, because they have made a commitment that they will become net zero or carbon neutral by 2030. So those are the kind of dynamics that supply chain professionals need to face today. And events like COVID pandemic or the Ukraine war, which at one time we might have thought of as black swan events that can happen probably once in 10 or once in 20 years or maybe even once in a century, are no longer such periodic or occasional events. And we're going to see them more and more, compounded further by climate change and the impact of the climate change. So what does this mean? It means that all the concepts, all the experiences, all the tools that you've been using in the past is probably not going to help us navigate and address the issues that we're going to face as supply chain professionals and supply chain managers in the future. Fortunately, technological advancements, whether it is AI or metaverse or blockchain, or 5G for that matter, are all advances that can be leveraged and can be used to make better decisions and also predict how we can kind of mitigate the risk associated with such unpredictable events that are likely to happen. So the choice of this year's conference is very, very appropriate and extremely relevant. And I've also noted that there are some very distinguished panelists from very diverse companies with lots of experiences who will be able to share how they think about it, how they are leveraging the technology to take better decisions. So I really wish all of you a great conference, exciting deliberations, and I really look forward to some recommendations about how this conference and the deliberations here can help us to improve our own academic program and research program to really produce graduates who can be able to better address some of these challenges. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a great conference.
We would like to thank our respected director, Dr. Dhawal sir, for his kind words and for taking time out of his busy schedule and address us through this video.
Leadership is not only having a vision, but also having the courage, the discipline, and the resources to get you there. A leader guides us towards excellence, and today we have such leaders among us. We now request Professor Ravindra Balekam to kindly welcome Mayur sir with a token of gratitude. We now request Professor Pramod Shetty to kindly welcome Sandeep sir with a token of gratitude. We now request Professor Rahul Mulay to kindly welcome Dhawal sir with a token of gratitude. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mayur sir, Sandeep sir and Dhawal sir for taking time out from their busy schedule and being present with us here today. We are delighted to introduce our guest to the conference. The keynote speaker for the day is Mr. Mayur Aggarwal. It is a pleasure to have you among us, sir. Mayur sir is the founder of ShipEasy, a company that provides logistics solutions. He is currently the director at Future Logic. He has vast industry experience in various roles in organizations like Mechatronic Technology Solutions, CreditMate and Nikunj Group. Sir has a bachelor's in production engineering from Father Consica Rodriguez College of Engineering and a master's in industrial engineering from Virginia Tech. Sir, we invite you to kindly deliver the keynote address.
Hello. I hope I'm audible. Check. Yeah. Okay. I think after gratitude from my side to the faculty, to the institution, to the students, and all the organizations along with my speakers who I'm sharing the podium with, thank you so much for finding me relevant and qualified to be addressing the keynote for today's event. And really a very warm welcome that the institution has given us. So I think when I got the call that you want to give a keynote for a conference to a B school, I think the most relevant thing I thought was not to bombard the students with too many facts and figures, but rather some insights that probably I could share with images that could be probably invoke a sense of learning, so that you all can take back some thoughts that you all can plan better supply chains of the future with. So I hope the font is not too small. I think it is. I don't know whether at the back you all can read or not, but as we spoke, let me just start with the context saying it's the emergence of e-supply chain. It's no longer being supply chain just as it is. The There's a lot of digital element coming into the supply chain, especially after the pandemic. And I think, as Director Sir actually mentioned, that such outages actually have been consequential. Even in 2008-9, the Beijing Olympics, creating an impact for China to remove all its polluting industries, must have been a havoc, right? So now I think COVID has made supply chain digital, and something that a connected world, a connected marketplace is something that we are moving towards. How do we start that? I think now customer is no longer the king. Now it's a digital king now. This kind of building closer relationships with your customer is really paying for all organizations. I think something that we are repeatedly seeing is that if you connect with your customers a lot more, it is going to yield you a lot more dividends. I'm sorry, I think the font is really small compared to. Yeah, it's all right. Okay. Back in the day, this is how distribution used to be defined. This is actually an investment website that kind of describes how distribution channel is. And it's describing it that a goods or services passed until it reaches the final buyer or the end consumer. Now the world is no longer going to respect you if you treat your final buyer or your end consumer like, okay, it should reach you. It is no longer like that. It is more relevant right now if you break through all of these channels and get very connected. I'm going to show an ad.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go.
You don't need to see any more of this ad. I think I've already informed you.
Lost together.
This was an advertisement by Coca-Cola in July 2020, middle of the pandemic, reminding people that as we got disconnected, what did it bring us? Back into our kitchens, back into our families, back into our dining tables. That's how they connected. And they built a closer relationship with their customer. Now imagine that, right? When you are in complete lockdown, I don't know whether in the first month we ever enjoyed Coca-Cola, right? They would have literally given up, right? They would have said, how do we survive a pandemic? And they came up with a really touching ad saying that, listen, you know what? We know what you're going through. But at the end of it is when they gave you a Coca-Cola bottle and they said, yeah, you know what? At the end of the meal, you can celebrate it with a drink of Coca-Cola. Share price of Coca-Cola has never been higher. For an extremely niche consumer product that you use as almost a luxury, has walked out of the pandemic because they connected much more closer to their audience. And how did they do this? Over YouTube. I think the ad was released, I think that date kind of marks pretty much, the coming back to the good old share prices. So imagine that. So you have to connect with your customers. I think it's no longer about, oh, my customer is a distributor, my customer is a wholesaler that buys from me. No, your end consumer is your customer. Everybody else is a cog in the wheel. I think this is, I couldn't find a more apt photograph, but back in the day, service used to be like this. I think if you all have experienced the toll-free numbers where you call up and say, listen, you know what, my AquaGuard is not working, my TV is not working. And there used to be this one extremely disgruntled call center employee who's on the edge handling 4 or 5 calls, pretty much answering the same thing. Now it's become chatbots. An automated chat engine. So you will not believe there are some applications that these kids are using every day. They are pretty much talking to a computer who's replying back relevant replies. I think all of you must have experienced Swiggy chatbot. Yes. There is no customer executive on the other line. It is just by the menus and the algorithm that everybody resolves their issues. Brands that connect to their customers directly with relevant tools are succeeding on this. I don't think Swiggy has a big call center. But you'd always hear of, the old school, the IT BPOs and all of that. But you've never heard Swiggy having a big BPO somewhere or a call center somewhere. I think it's not even relevant anymore. So I think you should connect with all the kind of tools that are possible with you. I think I can't understate this. I think if customer has become the digital king now, manufacturers who are connecting with their customers directly are benefiting like no other. All of these brands that you see over here, there are 15 brands on the right, sir. There must be close to about, I don't think any of them are older than 2010. All of them digital first, do not have the traditional wholesale, distribution, none of this. This is direct to home. What we used to cringe when we used to open our TV and we used to show the TV shops that used to be there, selling us patta and selling us extremely knickknacks back in the day. Those strategies now have propelled, all of these 15 are close to about $1 billion or more. It's incredible. And all of those industries that are there, food and beverage, are $1 trillion industry in India. You have $1 billion startups connecting with their consumers directly, shipping from warehouses, dark distribution centers, literally barely any cost center, and still being very relevant with their customers, digitally connected with their customers, and servicing them with chatbots. It's incredible. And that's how it's paying dividends. I think one more thing that you have to note now that you have acknowledged your customer is moving digital, you should acknowledge that your organization needs to become digital. You can't service a digital audience unless you yourself are digital internally. There was a survey done that digital automation in a company is actually making the employees more job satisfied. So now no longer do you have job satisfaction, you have to have a digital job satisfaction. You should have whether your company is really digital. I think an image like this can be quite, a lot of these students will relate to an image like this. I don't mind if I have 3 screens in front of me, I'm working in the night, I'm working remotely, no problem. Tomorrow's employees will be very happy like this. I think we have grown up in a culture where we wanted a good team engagement. HR used to be quite a prevalent function back in my day. I don't think HR is the one who wishes you a happy birthday nowadays. I don't know whether you all have gone through internships, but it must have been just a touch and go with HR. You have to evolve. Automation of your processes. Use as many tools. This is something of a probably a cliched photograph that I'm sharing with this Google Glass, even though it was not very successful. But you know what? I don't not see tablets being on shop floors. I don't see dedicated mobile devices on shop floors coming very soon. I think there are industries which leverage as many consumer electronic devices for their industrial processes, I think definitely are going to win. When I worked in a factory, I had a punch-in job, I had a punch-in activity, I had a report to fill, and I had a punch-out. I think the future, if employees get shown a bigger picture, are going to be a lot more involved. I think now no longer do the manufacturing graduates, the operations graduates No longer do they want to just punch in and do a few calculations, do an Excel sheet and leave, right? They want to see a bigger picture. I don't mind, even if I add 0.1% to the company's output, but at least show me where I am. Tell me where my output is actually coming into. And I think some might disagree, but this generation of graduates that I'm seeing, a lot more responsible, a lot more educated, a lot more empathetic. Unlike the loafers of my generation, I kid you not, we were quite aloof about work. We used to punch in and punch out. I think all of these things, if you leverage it, your organization is going to be in a much better stage. You're going to be digitally connected with your customers, you're going to be digital within. And then it would encourage, because at the end of the day, your employees invariably are a consumer of some other service, which is also, it's like a cyclic loop. Learn from consumer applications. I think organizations really need to learn. This is a flowchart of ordering on Swiggy. It's a food ordering application. It has 10 screens to tell you exactly how you can order biryani. I was in charge of a paint manufacturing quality inspection and the final inspection. My SOP was shorter than this. I had less check marks to fill on a daily level than how much Swiggy makes you fill to order a biryani. Learn from this. And the organizations, employees, okay, this, I'm sorry again, photograph might be a little small, but this is the heat map of the football players in a football match. This is literally populated with data and insight. And employees of yours are using this, are accessing this on an every weekend basis. If you think your employees, your next generation batch that you all are excellent in consuming big data. If you look at one F1 race, you've got so many insights. But you go back to your office, you've got barely any insight about anything. Why is it that organizations are not doing that? Don't think that we are not used to or we will not be able to accept it, but you all will have to give us that. This is a footprint of all the technology companies in the supply chain verticals. I don't think there was an option like this back in 2008-9 when I was graduating, 2007. I don't think you could call up a trucking company and book a vehicle. I don't think you could do last mile ever. We had distribution companies. There was 12 to 18% of consumer applications keep aside of their margins just so that last mile delivery happens to their consumers. Now you have plug-and-play contracted applications who will do that work for you at a fraction of the cost. Forget percentage terms. They will literally tell you, okay, 50 rupees a kilometer, I will deliver your goods from Bhiwandi to wherever your customer is. That's how the landscape has changed. And leveraging all of these things is where organizations will really prevail. I think we have covered the customer aspect, the organizational aspect, then comes everything outside, your partners, your logistics partners, the suppliers. You have to de-risk things. I think gone are the days where a single supplier, a single logistics operator is how you used to operate. They were favorites. You had quite a few old school companies running their own logistic companies who had become somehow married into the family, and that's how they operated. My daughter-in-law's family is my supplier for my factory. My cousin's brother is married into the logistic company that is executing my thing. No harm in that. But if that cousin of yours was based out of Singapore and you had COVID would you think you would be loyal to them? Or would you say, I'll shut shop, but you know what, my cousin's based out of Beijing, only they handle my logistics? I don't think so. You have to have a multiple supplier strategy for everything now. I think Director Sir mentioned it very clearly. He said, listen, Mayur, with one fuel source supply of Russian gas, their biggest plant, which makes 8,000 products, he just mentioned that. Shut shop overnight. Because you know why? Russia doesn't like NATO and things like that. What if you had a multiple supply? You had a supply, maybe Qatar would have been giving you a part of your gas from beforehand. What if you had renewable sources of energy? Not just with energy, look at it from logistics, warehousing, everything. Create a multiple strategy for your healthy output. This is a bomb for Apple's iPhone. Okay? Every component of theirs has a couple of suppliers. We have 4 suppliers for chips, 3 for display, 2 for storage. How would you rate this supplier base? Do you think this is a healthy supplier base to have? COVID gave them $4 to $9 billion worth of outage. They said we lost sales of $4 to $9 billion worth. I'm going to use Apple in both ways actually. I'm going to use in their failures as well as their success through this COVID. So imagine that. You had suppliers everywhere, yet you were losing out on sales. Sorry, I got a font a little small. Keep the customers aware. Link a lot of your contracts, your sales to dynamic pricing. I think logistics in India doesn't operate without having a component of diesel rate factor into their contract. So in logistics, at least in India, you operate with saying, okay, diesel rate is your base multiplier for how your services will be charged. Look at other spaces as well. Dynamic pricing, I think last year, I think pre-COVID, one of the monsoons, there was a heavy downpour. People from BKC were willing to pay 2,000 rupees to go to Berkeley. They were perfectly fine with it. They said, you know what, I think me reaching my final destination is worth the surge price. If these personnel are going to be fine with surge pricing, they are the buyers of industrial services and products. I think you have to inculcate that thought process. No longer are your 6-month, 11-month rate contracts with fixed rates going to be relevant anymore. If your suppliers are going to charge you variables, push for variable mechanisms to your customers. I have an example for KitKat. So if I have a supply from a different country for the exact, so this is a screenshot of a blogger who's comparing American KitKat with Indian KitKat, and if you can read the subtitles, he says you can even see how they look the same inside. He's tasted an American KitKat, which is a chocolate product, and an Indian one, and he said he tasted the same. It looks the same. Yet KitKat on one of the e-commerce websites in India lists a Belgian KitKat for 1,490 rupees, 1,490 rupees. If you want to have KitKat from Belgium, people are willing to pay 1,490 for that KitKat, which you get for 20 rupees on your shop outside. Made in India costs 20 rupees. If you get it from Belgium, people are willing to pay 1,490. Why not bring in dynamic pricing like that? If you have multiple suppliers, give them the rates. You want an iPhone from Noida? 30,000. You want an iPhone from California? 1,50,000. And people, I think consumers are perfectly fine. You have audiences on both ends. Look at variable pricing, look at de-risking. Okay, this again is an iPhone example. iPhone 11, 12, 13 is being compared here. Okay? COVID is around the period when 12 came into the market. we had shortages. It is sold at 53,000 rupees. But the lemon, which was an earlier year brand, which was in multiple stock, was being sold at 65,000 rupees. And the newest one is at 79, I think. This is the spec sheet. All three products are identical. RAM is same, the camera is same, the storage is only a little different, the display is the same, the bionic chips are just became 13 to 14 to 15. Create a product strategy wherein your variables come out quickly. If your product is 100, imagine your product has 100 features. Release an immediate feature or release a new product with 101 and call it a complete different one. You know, your supply chain is not getting impacted. And your consumer is suddenly getting thrilled every so often, you're getting a new version. Literally nothing different. I had to really ask my wife, like, what is the difference between 13 and 11? Why do you want to upgrade it so fast? Incidentally, 11 turned out to be good enough. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Pro series of those iPhones, all those cameras are the same until 14 Pro. From your 12 Pro till 14 Pro, the same camera. Apple has created that strategy where it is incremental changes every 6 months. Their supply chain doesn't really get wrecked. They get a premium every 6 months. It is incredible, right? Here you have, I feel they have completely de-risked their product portfolio. You could literally be in any part of the world right now, you could identify an iPhone, you could be willing to buy an iPhone. It's pretty fantastic. I think as the last one I would definitely bring in is that, yes, sustainability. I think directors have also mentioned sustainability, and it is becoming real. And it is a big question mark. Won't believe, but 50% of world's emissions are generated by 6 industries. So it becomes simple, right? If 50% of your world's wars were happening by six countries, you would have known, right, where your problems are, right? You would have tried to fix it like that, right? But why are we not fixing our emission problem? We know those industries. Yet many of the CEOs are unresponsible. They're struggling to respond. 54% of the CEOs don't know where to start the scenario analysis of trying to make their company less, emitting and less impactful to the climate. That's crazy. You know exactly where your problems lie, yet CEOs don't know where to start. Most emissions are coming from all of these verticals. I think we're quite clear, the production unit, the logistics, the warehousing, that's where emissions are coming from. But here we have Cochin Airport completely self-sustaining on solar energy. You're telling me an airport is functioning on its own in solar energy and your warehouse can't? What is your warehouse consuming? Is it lights? Is it air conditioning? And what? I don't think any warehouse in India is, at least average warehouses don't have air conditioning. There's that one cabin where the warehouse manager sits. Why can't you make solar panels? Why can't you figure out a strategy to make your warehouse carbon zero? It's so simple. A complete airport in Cochin did it. You actually have, again, sorry about the font size, but you have an easy calculation for every person to measure their carbon footprint. There are 8 calculators, okay? Multiply your monthly electric bill by 105. So on, so forth, and if you recycle, there are negative figures. You can come up with your own personal carbon footprint. An organization's got what? Data analytics people, procurement engineers, supply chain graduates. Why can't organizations figure out their own carbon footprint? As a matter of fact, I was just talking to another gentleman, a peer of mine. He actually mentioned, you know what? products in the future, if they come with a tag saying carbon zero, I think people might pay a premium for it. But why can't organizations calculate their footprints? This is my personal vehicle GPS OBD device telling me how much fuel I burned on a trip yesterday. Shows right here 0.8 liters. You're telling me your logistics department doesn't know how many kilometers the vehicles are running. You're paying them on the basis of kilometers. You know exactly which vehicle you're hiring. You should be able to calculate your carbon footprint. It is so easy. I think another sustainability question is going to be how to start. It's going to start with data. You will have to know where exactly your footprint is, where your impact is, and you'll have to work backwards. Guwahati railway station went carbon zero to a point that it is now plugging power back into the grid. Not only was turning sustainability a good cost saving, but it's generating revenue for them. I think if you look at it, it is much easier. It is just that it is not attractive enough. It still sounds like something that we should do. But I feel we can do and we could do it in a very easy manner. I think with that, I've covered man, material, method, and machine, I guess. The 4 M's of supply chain as they used to teach us. And I hope with that, you get somewhat of an insight on how change can be brought. It's not very difficult. With that, I thank you for your time and open to Q&A.
Thank you, Mayur sir, for the wonderful session. I'm sure that our audience has gained numerous insights on how supply chain has transformed over the years and has now become e-supply chain, and how customer is now the e-king of the market, with examples like Coca-Cola, and also how organizations have to adapt to digitization and automation with examples like Swiggy. Also, how climate change is real and how none of us are free from carbon footprint in today's age. We welcome questions from the audience and invite them to participate in the discussion.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for such an insightful session. So I would like to know what is your take on metaverse and how it is helping supply chain innovate.
That's a very interesting question, even though I gave many consumer application learnings to be transcended into industry, but I didn't think that metaverse question of transcending into the industry. It's a unique problem statement. What would you use metaverse for in the industry? Simulation. I think forecasting, planning, simulation. There used to be this, I remember SimMod, I don't know whether you all remember, there used to be a software called SimMod, wherein you could define the nodes of your supply chain with their lead times. And you would run a simulation and it would tell you where your blockages are going to be like. Look at exploring metaverse like that. Why not? Look at any of your business simulation games. I don't know whether you all, don't go up till metaverse. Metaverse is slightly into VR territory. But I would recommend just take a step back. You have so many business strategy games. SimCity, Railroad Tycoon, I don't know, Factorio, if you all have heard of it or not. I'm still in that generation where I still play computer games. And I used to love these video games, A Factorio game is about a man dropped onto Mars with nothing but a chisel or something, one tool, and you have to build a spaceship to return back to Earth. Imagine the manufacturing and supply chain. You know, you have to build conveyors, you have to build fads, you have to build everything from scratch. I think the future supply chain leaders are going to be coming with, you know, I have played Age of Empires. If you remember Age of Empires, it used to tell you 4 different tabs: how much your timber, how much stone, how much gold, how much something else you produce, meat. And you go out there and wage a war, right? That's the kind of business intelligence layer that, you know, students of now are going to be exposed to. But can you look at your factory's dashboard and can you figure out how much raw material I have to go out there and conquer my market? No. It should be easy, right? But it's not like that. So look at it from there. You know, metaverse might be too drastic a step, but you have multiple things that you're so unconditionally exposed to, which if you bring to your work life, I think can bring in fantastic, you know, disruption to your productivity. I hope I answered that partially. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. So you talked about sustainability and gave examples of companies like Coca-Cola. Few days back, I went through a video on YouTube where there was a mountaineer who went to the Himalayas. He was talking about how companies like HUL, PNG, and for the matter Coca-Cola, so you find products of cans and packets, all of those given in Himalayas. So he gave an estimation that in the coming 30 years, you won't be able to see Himalayas not because of the clouds and fog, but because of all these garbages that these companies have created. So do you feel for these companies which are so big at this moment, that they only at this moment care about is only the share prices and the profits they make? Do you think that the idea of sustainability will come in maybe the agendas that they have in the near future?
I think I'm going to respond that in 2 ways. One, I did not use Coca-Cola for a sustainability example. I did not use that. I did never. There is no FMCG company that I would like probably stand behind as a sustainable company. But anyways, I will take that question. You know who's going to make that change? Okay, let me ask you. You know how much Coca-Cola costs to make?
So it depends on the SKUs. So
For 25 rupee bottle or 5 ml bottle, how much do you think it costs to?
20 to 30 years.
What?
The small bottles.
20 to 30 what?
Rupees
Costs less than a rupee
for making.
to make a liter of Coca-Cola. Okay, it retails at I think 60 rupees. Distillery water. PNC has the country's cleanest water. Do you know that? The tap water that you have, you can boil and drink it. You don't need distillery. Don't blame the FMCG companies. It's the consumers with their one sip of water in a plastic bottle. Why? I have switched, I love my drinks. I have switched completely from plastic soda bottles to canned soda bottles. 75% recyclable. No matter, you know what they say over here? They tell you this is recyclable. Do they tell you how much to recycle? If they save a percent of plastic out of this, do you think that's recycled? It is the consumers who need to change this. FMCG companies will adapt to whatever the consumers do. You will have to pick your sustainable, your carbon-free footprints. You know those chip packets that you consume and throw away, and then you laugh about the fact that it's 70% air. I'm sorry, you know, the environment is going to laugh back at us. It's not the companies to blame. The companies do what the consumers do. They are the profit making absolutely fine with it. But we need to change. I think I'm sorry, but a very personal reply. I did not mean it that way. I meant me, myself as well. And I'm making that conscious decision. I have a Milton Thomas bottle in my car, which will not get heated up if the car is out in the sun. I will not consume a packaged bottled water. That I have made it as my personal mission. So I think it starts with what the consumers want, and there only I think industry will change.
So I think there is a packaging by Coca-Cola which is into pilot mode as of now.
It will always remain value. It's only for the advertisements. You will have to stop buying those plastic oil-based bottles, and you have to say that incrementally. I think there's one brand called Ocean, which is the soda that I have at home. They literally tell you, you know what, we are more expensive. But you know what? That's the price to pay to recycle those cans. And we are completely fine with it. We will let you know about it. I'm not going to use Salman Khan to let you know about it. That's the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
You talked about Apple. You said that Apple is adding some one or two features and then selling it at a higher price. So don't you think so that over a time the consumers who are using Apple, they would start putting the faith in Apple? Similar like the strategy which you mentioned, like add one or two features and then you sell it as a different product altogether. But then over the time the consumers will start using it, because as an Apple consumer, I don't like to upgrade right now.
But you have your own answer to your own question. You don't feel like upgrading your own iPhone, right? And incidentally, you won't believe, but it was the charisma of Steve Jobs that carried the brand to a different level. No doubt about that. But you won't believe branding as a component in an organization can literally brainwash a customer. Sorry for that lack of a more sophisticated word. But if you look at any marketing, branding department, their goal is to make you forget the fact that you are procured something that was incredibly of different value, but that gimmickry around it kind of makes you want to pay a premium for it, right? Like, I do understand that my OnePlus now take as great photographs, but am I less productive because of it? Is the time telling different? Is the call making mechanism different? Am I not connected on WhatsApp with you? Am I not checking my email with you? But you paid 40,000 more. I don't know, for that camera. You can get a DSLR, you can get a professional camera at that much. But I know you can't put it in your pocket. See, at the end of the day, you will have to realize yourself. And it comes with age. And I think 20s, everybody kind of is blown by the glimpse of things, right? So, and brands kind of leverage it. Sure. Yeah, good. I think any more that we can take up a little later? Yes, sir, please.
Okay, I think I'm audible.
Wow,
I just wanted to share something that I've been to Baroda, and of course Gujarat is in the news now. But very, very fascinating to see. I went to two of my cousins, and each of them, they stay in, like Baroda is not so much of apartments and all this, bungalows and row houses.
They're lucky.
Yeah. So they have put the solar panels, and in fact they say they paid around 1.5 lakhs each, and but they say the payback is 5 years. So for 25-30 years it will work, but the payback comes in 5 years. They are not paying electricity bills most of the time. In fact, they are the same thing what you said. They are generating the electricity and giving it back to the grid. And very innovative things by the Gujarat government, which I have not seen somewhere else, is that a place like Aggarwal, there is a place where there is a covered one place road is covered with solar Aggarwal.
The whole canal,
Yeah,
Narmada
the canal.
canals are covered with solar panels.
So they prevent the water getting evaporated, and plus there is a solar panel, and that gives the electricity back to the grid.
Sir, these are the initiatives. This is how the change will happen. You've given both examples of a government and a personnel. They are the least powered, and organizations are so much more powered. Literally, they have financing behind them, they have expertise behind them. And I think the warehouse example is something that really annoys me. I don't know why the warehouses across are not carbon zero. You could have solar panels on your roof. And of course, enough light is being consumed. You can't replace the forklifts. But what else is your energy requirement in a warehouse? Why does it stop you from putting solar panels in? I think very relevant. I think that's a very good observation. That's what the industry needs to start acting on. Thank you, sir, for that. think we're good. Any more questions? I'm sure I'll approach you a little later on. Thank you everybody.
Thank you, Mayur sir. I'm sure our audience gained numerous insights from you, including how OnePlus does exactly the same as an iPhone does. So, yeah.
Moving on, we would now like to introduce our esteemed chief guest, Mr. Sandeep Chatterjee. Mr. Sandeep Chatterjee is currently working as supply chain leader at IBM Consulting, and he holds the position of chairman and CEO of International Supply Chain Education Alliance India, and is also a member of Board of Governors IMOE. Before he joined IBM, he held the position of director at Deloitte, leading the supply chain and emerging technologies practice. He holds a bachelor's in engineering from IIEST Shipcoal and an MBA from IMOE. He has also worked with organizations such as KPMG, Oracle, FORSE, and Tata Motors. We invite Sandeep sir on the dais to enlighten us.
Did I give the clicker? Ah, there it is. Yes, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me. I think Mayur made my job easy because he gave you a perspective of the consumer behavior. So I will pick it up from there, and I will do a very focused discussion on the automotive supply chain because that's where a lot of people are thinking about EVs. So I thought that maybe this is a perspective you would like to have a look. So what we'll talk about, I will introduce the topic, I will talk a little bit about the inventory, then I talk about the digitization, which is everybody's talking about. Then I talk about the EV, which is how it is impacting supply chain, because that's where I think a lot of you will be actually making a career there, because that is the future. As Mayur spoke about sustainability, because that's where the world is moving towards. And then I speak briefly about the IMO 2020 because these are all regulations which are coming in. And if you are in a society, you cannot ignore that stakeholder. And finally, I look at some of the disruptive trends because as young, bright students, you design something for tomorrow, not for today. So that's why it's important for you to really look at how things are moving over the years. The problem with that, as a country, we have done really well. But a lot of times we have designed something for today, we never really looked at a futuristic way. Look at our roads. We are trying to catch up, right? But some countries did better than us. Similarly, railways. It's fascinating to see railways is now gearing up for moving trucks on rails. It was never the case. So these things are happening. Again, we are catching up. But thing is, if you really follow data and if you really follow what is happening, it makes your job easy. And then, because if you do something which is at least sustainable for a few years, I think you have done your job. So let me look at the transforming forces which are first is your electrification. There's a lot of focus on sustainability, geopolitical crisis, everything is there. So that's why there's a strong push on electrification. Okay, sure. And then next is your new entrants. Now, it's not that car makers are just doing that. There are consumer product companies which are getting into this. So we call it as a shared mobility where you have every other company. For example, look at Amazon. People say it's a data company. People say it's a FMCG company. It's a distribution company. It's everywhere. That's how they are slowly moving. So it's not just A car maker will make a car, it's technology and consumer product companies which are getting into this business. Third is again what we have looked at is if you look at our current workforce, 92% is millennials, and the way the aspiration is when my dad always aspired to own a car, to own a flat. But now if you look at the consumer behavior, we don't want to own something. It's all a service, it's all a, we want to experience it. I would rather spend money on the experience rather than trying to own something. That's I think consumers, in fact, companies what they're giving you product as a service, they are renting it out to you. And that's one way, good way it is sustainable because they can always buy it back. So the disposal thing is, so it's good for the economy, but that is what the trend is happening. And finally, of course, there's a technology convergence. Today's cars are not car manufacturers, they are software firms because it's all data, it's all, everything is controlled by a software. So don't think of today's car makers is just, unlike when I started with Tata Motors, we used to make trucks. It's not like that. It's all, everybody now plays in the software. Car making is just a commodity. So that is the shift which is happening. So these are the top 4 trends which is actually driving your entire thing. And remember, Mayur mentioned customer is king and it drives everything. So that's where I think we are moving towards. Now this is again a study which was done slightly dated 2018 but still relevant. If you look at it, the majority of the money, if you look at it, is all in the service and aftermarket. It's the design part, the production part, the economies of scale or whatever you call it. So costs are coming down. So the margins are really less there. But what is going to differentiate it is your how you serve the customer, what kind of experience which you give. I think that is where the major money, when I talk about the automobile industry as such, it's not the Tata Motors makes more money from spare parts than making a truck. Because truck is almost like we give it at almost like a break-even price. But spare parts is where they make the money. So that is the thing you need to be looking at. Because a lot of times we ignore the aftermarket thing, but that's the largest chunk when it comes to this industry. Now in terms of the market change, again, very interesting slide. If you look at it, what is driving? So again, it's electric drive chain, fuel cells, lithium batteries, sensors, electronics, and I have shared the presentation, so you don't have to really worry about noting it down. You can look at all these data. So look at what is growth, what is stagnant. Why I'm talking about it is the research which is done, and when you sit in a position, you are looking at a more futuristic way. This is where you drives your decision. So understand that when the government announced that we will get into EV vehicles, the fuel pipes, carburetors, these companies went bust. So people started thinking, rethinking. Some companies have geared up to that, but some companies were really laggards in that. So it's very, very important to watch out for the market trends because that is what's going to drive your economy. Now again, this I briefly touched upon. If you look at cyber security, it's a very small segment right now, but this is going to be the biggest. I'm just pointing it out. Right now it looks like this, but remember that as we move more and more data to the cloud, I think what I say is there are always smarter people. I can be smart, but there's always somebody smarter. That's why this is where I think when you make a decision, don't ignore the cyber security part. Because it looks very small right now, but if you look at the attacks, in fact, when I was with Dhawal, I think we had an attack, and I think our network was crippled for 2 days, and that's a huge loss for us. Similarly, there was a scam in Bangladesh where billions of dollars were just wiped out in a matter of 1 day. So this is, I think, criminals, and now you have AI-based cyber criminals. So we are using AI, but cyber criminals are also using AI to be more smarter than us. So this is where the world is moving. So be very, very mindful of where we are. Now this is again, I talked briefly about it. So again, it's a very 2x2 what you do in a B school. So I thought that will be this will be of interest to you. So this is where I think the software part, the battery fuel part, this is what's going to make your money. And that is going to be a differentiator. Again, this is based on analysis. See, this is still relevant. we say that we teach it in a B school, it's not relevant, but it can be any 2 by 2 matrix. This is what you actually look at it and it's still relevant, and the way you present it doesn't matter. Remember that you need to look at your growth segment. In fact, a lot of companies, if you compare between 1955 and 2022, out of the Fortune 500 companies, only 37 remain today. Because they have not looked at what the future is, and we should look at as a target, we have a target that the newer services should account for 35% of our revenue in the next 5 years. That's a target which we work with. So I think that is the kind of futuristic thing that we make a decision we are actually looking at. Now let's touch a little bit about inventory again. Mayur spoke briefly about it, that single supplier, very risky. It's very cost effective. But what happened during COVID? The pharma industry, if you look at it, in India, 70% of the raw materials comes from China. We call it as an API. And when China shut its borders, I think we had a tough time. So that's where I think if you look at any global supply network, it's everywhere. In fact, we mentioned about Apple, how it is. So similarly for an automobile, again, it's all more diverse, how the supply chains are spread. And if you look at it, we face this problem. We say they have excess inventory or we have shortage. Now this is very common, and this is the problem I've been seeing for the last 22 years. So these problems are not common. The problem is we have more of the bad inventory and less of the good. Inventory is not bad. Your CFO will argue that no, I should not have inventory, it's on my balance sheet. But understand that if you are talking about a same-day delivery, you need to have inventory because our manufacturing and procurement lead times are not that small that we can manufacture immediately and give it. Because in fact, I was speaking to somebody from Tata Motors yesterday, and what they are saying is Tata Motors always was a seller's market. So whatever you produce, you better buy it. But now, whenever you book a car, the first thing consumer asks is, can you deliver it in 3 hours? So everybody is thinking the e-commerce. So that's where I think it's important that you still need to have inventory. But remember that you should know what to stock, where to stock, and how much to stock. The problem is we have more of the bad inventory and less of the good. That is where the problem lies with. And again, it's not a inventory problem, it's a planning problem, how you look at it. We have not really spent our time because the moment we count our stock and see that this is there, it's huge inventory. But we have not really planned it better. Let's understand it, let's be very clear. It's more of a planning problem and not an inventory problem. And again, I spoke about it, it's a rapid product flow. 1980s, except for the professor, I think none of you were born at that time. So I remember I wanted a Bajaj scooter, and there was an 18-month waiting list, 18 months. And I was okay with that because I didn't have a choice. But today, if I go to any of these two-wheeler showrooms, if I don't get it, I will go to somebody else because somebody else is willing to do that. So what is driving this is the customer tolerance time has reduced drastically. You can say that we have spoiled the customer, whatever it is. But the customer, today's customer is very impatient. They want it immediate. Think about those cameras. You have you click a photo, 36 rolls, you go to the photo studio, you get your photo after 2 weeks. But today you click it on your smartphone and immediately upload. You are not willing to wait that time. So that's the consumer mindset. And e-commerce, I think, is responsible. I will not say e-commerce has driven all this. Sitting at home, I am getting everything. I think I don't have dreamt of buying a dress sitting at home. So now this is again the trend. I just wanted to talk about the third one, customer tolerance, and that has actually driving everything. Things have changed a lot. Again, this is more of a trend which you all know. But the third, which is the greatest thing, which is actually driving all of these trends. Now let's look at it again. This is a very interesting point. Your supply chains, we were taught it can either be efficient or responsive. So efficient means I am a low cost producer, I do things efficient. Responsiveness, customer wants it, I give it immediately. Now responsiveness is always expensive. But as a company, I have to be poor. Now how do I do it? Now, if you look at it, Asian Paints, in the 1990s, if you go to any of these retail outlets, ask for any color, and if they don't have it, They will say we don't have it, we will have to make it for you. So 3 to 6 months. Now you go to any of these Asian based retail outlet, ask for any color, they will mix and match and give it. So they have standardized it to that extent that you are differentiating it closer to the customer. So that's where the money is. That's where if you have a, you are still an efficient producer, but you are still responsible because you are differentiating closer to the customer. Because the way we are moving it, everybody wants a personalized product, everybody wants a customized product, and if I have a company, I have to do it, I will be bankrupt because if each customer is a segment, that's not financially viable for me. So the best bet is have a product but differentiate it closer to the customer. This is where every industry is. For example, if you look at a pizza, you have a base, right? And then you share your, choose your toppings and all that. So every industry is moving. So if you, the moment you start working, everybody will say that how can we be both responsive and efficient? This is where I think the money is. Remember that. This is where you, whatever you are studying in these 2 years, that will actually go into thinking what we should do. Again, as I said, the supply chains have become more longer, global supply chains. And one thing what I have said is outsourcing looks very easy. But understand that outsourcing comes at a cost because you lose control, you lose visibility. Because if I have a supplier way in Thailand, and if something breaks there, if I don't know, my supply chain is disrupted. So outsourcing is a very easy, but it comes at a cost. So that's why a lot of companies are doing the nearshoring. They want more control. So maybe if somebody is in US, they wanted it from Mexico. So again, this is as a company, you have to look at what are the pros and cons, but understand that outsourcing is not that you totally lose control over the supply. In fact, Cisco Systems, if you look at it, it's a company which is into this video conferencing, networking. And Cisco doesn't manufacture anything, they design. And the manufacturing is done by the contract manufacturers. And one person, one employee of Cisco manages 7 partners in supply chain, and they have done it clearly. So understand that elongated supply chain, but you still need control. So technology has helped us. You know that what we call it, digital twin, whatever you call it, you know that how it is. So remember that it's very easy to say I will outsource, but remember that there's a cost implication. And again, as I said again, we just don't have to solve the supply problem. The demand and supply problem, we have to look at both of them together. You can, forecasts are always wrong, but say it's the kind of money you want to spend in a forecasting algorithm, vis-a-vis you want to. But remember that you need to look at both the sides together. Don't look at a supply chain either only from a demand angle or from supply angle. You will make a siloed decision. This is the, I think, the mindset, the kind of thinking you have to really train yourself to do. And again, this is one way of doing it. There are multiple ways. MRP, if you look at it, you have a forecast and you come down to what material you will produce at what time. So one thing is again you need buffers and you need this decoupling. Decoupling means you have an elongated supply chain, but you put an inventory at an intermediate point so that the shock you can absorb the shock. So this is one way of how you can look at it. There are multiple ways of looking at it. But understand that the net is you need to have buffers. Inventory is not bad because any CFO will always fight with you that we have so much inventory, but for a supply chain person, you need inventory. But the only thing is you need to right size it, you need to right time it, otherwise you will not be able to reach the customer service. And next is customer service levels, don't track it from 100%. It's a company, I'm okay with 80%. Similar demand fill rate, I want to do 70%, I'm okay with that. So as a company, you should have these policies. Because a lot of time people try to meet every demand, don't do it. You will, it's not financially viable. So look at it, what are demands you want to cater to. Unfortunately, some of these e-commerce firms, they have gone, not looked at profitability, now the VCs have become more careful. And if you look at the VC funding today, it's the lowest in all these years. Because they are also become, they are just not putting away their money. Remember that you should have growth, but profitable growth. If you look at IBM now, initially we expanded so much, but now we don't take a project unless it's profitable. That's where I think the world is moving towards. And then I will like to touch upon digitization. Now, all this we spoke about digital and all that. See, this was always there. Only thing is three things. Bandwidth is exponential because I remember when I first logged into Hotmail in 1998, it took me 30 minutes to send an email. So that's where what happened. Storage again. Now storage I think is very cheap. In fact, those days even my laptop had a 10 GB hard disk. Now it's moves into something. And of course, computing power. So because technology has supported us, we are able to reach this. Of course, the prices are still higher. A small and medium enterprise may not be able to afford it. But prices have come down that at least people are thinking it. Second thing is to integrate two technology. It was a nightmare. But today, any technology can talk to any other technology. So we have open source, we have cloud, we have all this. So all this is possible because technology made those giants. Had technology not supported us, we would not have really thought of running a factory, sitting in a room, using a dashboard. It would have not have been possible. This has thanks to technology. So as a B school grad, don't ignore technology. Technology is there to stay with you. I don't expect you to code, but at least understand how a blockchain works, how an AI, because tomorrow you will lead a digital project, and if you really don't know how a blockchain works, you will not get the respect for it. That's why spend some time learning technology, because this is going to stay with us. Remember, I as a student made the mistake. I stayed away from all the IT courses, and it's destiny that I ended up working with two free technology companies. So that's what life does to you. And then again, this is from a supply chain point of view. Know the store model, the plan, source, make, deliver. These are real life examples. The COVID vaccine, it came up in record 8 months. Typically, any vaccine takes 4 years. But we had a lot of clinical data integrated. We were able to do simulation. That's why it was really fast. In terms of the planning phase, you use the social, and the moment you have a smartphone, you have given your data to somebody. So whatever you click, somebody is actually looking at all your clicks, and people have looked at the inventory management using what you do on your social media. Strategic sourcing again, it's a multiple of suppliers have nothing. It's not rocket science. It's common sense, but only thing algorithms have much become better. Workforce COVID enabled us to work remotely. Of course, not every industry would work remotely. Particularly logistics industry, you have to be on the ground because remote doesn't work. And I think I was privileged that I was able to work from home, but not every industry worked. So understand that with use of Google classes and all that, we were able to actually handle some of these manufacturing stuff. Predictive routing, of course, its algorithms have much become better. For example, if you look at Uber, you know that this route is actually red, so take another route. And of course, augmented reality in terms of your remote, doing maintenance remotely. This is actually coming in a big way. This I just want to slightly touch upon. Industry 1.0 came in when man wanted to be more, it was too much of human manual work, so we wanted to make our life easy. So we had steam engines. Like Industry 2.0, we had the World War, everything was devastated. So we started getting more efficient, we had those time and motion study. So that's why Industry 2.0 came in. 3.0 came in where we looked at, we had grown so big that we wanted to, the paper and pencil was not enough. So we started moving things to the digital media, that's where ERP came. But now if you look at it, we are in an era where connected devices. For example, I should get a notification at 12 o'clock at night that my package has reached my warehouse. So I think this is where, and again, as I speak, Industry 5.0 is already coming. Of course, as a industry, we have not really, very few companies have been able to achieve 4.0. We are talking about 5.0 where you integrate AI into all that, but that is again the most far-fetched thing. Again, this is a very busy slide, but what I wanted to tell you is there are a lot of digital initiatives which you will do in your company, but look at what is the priority for you. If you are an asset-heavy company, you will look at your asset value. But if you are in an FMC, maybe your point of sales data application is boring. So don't try to do everything together. This is just an example of what, again, I'm leaving the slides here, you can have a look. But understand that what you are trying to achieve, that is very, very important, very, very critical. Now this is one or two examples I wanted to quote because what we spoke is theory. Caterpillar, again, one of the largest earth-moving equipments, and they all need maintenance. Now if Caterpillar has 1 lakh machines all over the world, they need maintenance, and you cannot put a personnel everywhere to track data. So they have again a sensor which tracks all this data and it tells you that this machine needs maintenance. It's not a rocket science, it's common sense. But because of technology now, using a dashboard, we know which machine needs maintenance. So I think that way they have been able to reduce a lot of this downtime. 3D printing again, a lot of things have come up. 3D printing now, the way I look at it, it works on the principle that the fixed cost is low, but the variable cost is high. So 3D printing doesn't work for mass production. So there is one part which you will produce once in your life. 3D printing is a good way of doing. In fact, if you go to the Geo Center, Mondelez has a 3D printer where you can actually 3D printer chocolate. So you can just try it. So they have been trying all this. So this is again a technology which is, and why it is now affordable? Because in 2016 there were 3 companies which had the patent. They went off patents. So prices have come down. This is now an affordable technology, and the way things are moving for limited parts, I think this is where we have been able to make giant strides. This I briefly spoke about. Any aircraft needs maintenance, and aircraft maintenance person are in high demand. So you can use a combination of AR, VR to actually do a remote kind of a thing. Now let's look at the EV. I will just slightly touch upon this. Now any EV, if you look at it, this is all the stakeholders. You have a power source. You need a power source. It can be solar, it can be fossil fuel. Again, with sustainability, fossil fuel is a no-no. But understand that you need to look at your power source. You need to look at your grid, because this is where your source of electricity is going from. Then you need to look at your infrastructure, and then again in terms of your charging stations. Now EV looks fantastic, but managing the supply chain for a EV is difficult because there are not enough charging stations. A lot of companies are struggling because they have built the product. But this is where again supply chain comes in, where you need to look at all this together. You just cannot have an industry just looking at that I have built the thing. But if there are no charging stations after everything, how do you manage the supply chain of charging? So that will be very, very critical when you design one. Then I touch upon the IMO again. This is a regulation in terms of sulfur. So now there's a lot of what do you say? People are looking at, have become more aware that we are destroying the planet. In fact, if you look at it, even a 1.5 degree increase in temperature is going to break about. So this is again, we are looking at the quality. In fact, a very interesting thing that aviation turbine fuel, they are trying with a sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. And Boeing is the first company which is going to try it out. And if it works out, I think we are moving to it. So there's a lot of consumer pressure around that. So I just wanted to touch upon these things. And finally, in terms of, again, this is how a car life cycle looks like in terms of sustainability. So we talk about circular economy. Now, circular economy is not just you eliminate waste. You regenerate for the economy. For example, there is a waste, something which is used as an input for some other industry. So understand that when you are looking at sustainability, look at the entire picture, because in the next 5 to 10 years, I think by the time you enter the industry, this is going to be a way. Now, a lot of people are already talking. There's not much which is happening. But next 2 to 3 years, this is going to understand that this is going to be a big focus, big KPI for all of you. That's why understand it from this point of view. When you look at any life cycle, look at where else you can have a more of a circular kind of thing. Because this is where the world is going towards. And then I leave with the last slide. Again, this is McKinsey. So if look at it from a customer expectation, people are looking at a seamless experience. People are looking at data. So data analytics is going to play a big part. And understand that from a next generation vehicles, there's a green importance of green consciousness. In fact, Tatas have done really very well in terms of these green vehicles. And in terms of counting for this is important that there are new players. Don't expect that your competition is going to be a automobile company. It can be anybody because we have reached that stage. And finally, as I speak, there are a lot of startups which has actually done well, but over the next 2 to 3 years, there will be consolidation and we will see a more shift of in the industry. So thank you so much. I know I covered a lot of things in a very limited time, but I'm open to any of your comments, questions. And if not be anything, you can just just have a chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such insightful session. I hope our audience have gained some very good insights about sustainability, the current trends in supply chain management, and also inculcating a new thought process about the planning of inventory and not just focusing on the level of inventory, the discussion in supply chain management. I'm sure the audience have gained numerous insights. We now welcome audience to call for questions and invite them to participate in the discussion.
Sir, you yourself mentioned that managing a supply chain for an EV market is challenging enough. Now there is a shift towards hydrogen fuel cells. So how will it impact the supply chain and the future dynamics of the automotive sector?
I think that's a great question. Now, if you change your fuel, first thing is your engine, everything has to be changed. So the moment you get into a new fuel, so first of all, producing a hydrogen is not that the technology is there, but only thing is how you do it. That thing is expensive. Second thing is you have to now redesign the vehicle. Because not a diesel engine, you just cannot put a hydrogen fuel. So that how the CNG came in. You have to CNG was easy because you just had to change a few things. But we have to look at how we will design a car, and that means you have your auto spares, you have your ancillary industry. Entire industry will actually now change. Again, you have to look at where all I will get the fuel from. Maybe once I produce hydrogen, can I put it in a petrol pump, an hydrogen pump, or do I need to store it in a special way? So all these things we have to be able to look at it. And then in terms of if I'm doing an export of vehicles, that is a consideration. Then for different markets, maybe Europe will have a different regulation than US, even for hydrogen power. So all these aspects we have to look at when I'm looking at a new fuel. Fuel change is not easy, but you have to look at these. It's good for the economy. There's a lot of promise which is there, but only thing we have to hold you. And remember that there will always be resistance because people will fight that I don't want to do away with the petrol, and because then what will these companies do? So there will be a lot of reasons. You have to also fight that with that is very good. You have to look at society also as a stakeholder.
Sir, good morning. And building on to his question, as we have seen from the current Russia-Ukraine war, that the supply for oil from Russia has been cut off. It has been highly regulated by Russia, and because of that, the entire Europe is suffering.
Yeah.
So if we say that the hydrogen fuel will be used in vehicles, and as our Minister Aggarwal has said that India will be up for green hydrogen. So could you give us your perspective on how would the transportation of hydrogen take place, and what could be its impact if such another calamity happens?
See, a lot of these things are man-made disasters. Nobody thought that the Russia and the Ukraine war will linger for so long. And the point is, US has not not that powerful that it will has been able to dictate. Some of these things are beyond our control. So now if you look at it, there was a news that the Ukraine was very upset that we are buying oil from Russia. So I think all these geopolitical things, we don't have much control over that. But what if India becomes the green hub for oxygen, hydrogen, we have to look at the pipelines. But remember that whether Pakistan will allow a pipeline to go through them. So all these things, there's a lot of political angle which you have to look at, which we tend to ignore. So it's good to say that India will become a hub. But on the other side, remember that Russia has huge oil reserves. US has huge oil reserves. They will not let it happen so easily. So then what will they have built these resources over years, and that's their, what do you say, trump card. They will not let it. There will be a political move that people will try to create problems. So it will not be that easy. So that's where I think we need to look at something around world politics, because I know as B school grads we want to look at strategy, but understand that power and politics, I think these are the two important lessons which I was taught in a B school, but I never used it in my life. You will learn it the hard way. So that is also very important for the geopolitics. Again, a short answer is, technologically it is feasible, but you also have to play the geopolitical angle. And follow history, follow world politics, it will be good because you are all working in a global company. All these dynamics are going to play a big role.
So one more question.
Yeah.
So like we thought of moving to EVs like for the market,
Yes.
As compared to the fossil fuels which we have, right? But don't you think like when we want to make an EV with the battery, and all the minerals which are there in that they are also part of very limited resources. So what is your take on that? Like for example, if we look for a battery, so we will see lead, we will see lithium and cobalt.
Yeah.
But most of them is coming from the other regions, and they are also scarce.
Right.
So don't you think the transition from fossil fuel, like even a transition in this to EV again, then there will be a crunch of the resources?
You are right, it will not be easy, because if they say that I will completely switch over from fossil fuels, there will be forces which will not let you out. And as you rightly said, some of these minerals are scarce. So earlier we could not even store energy, but thanks to lithium ion battery, now we are able to at least store this. But maybe tomorrow there will be some other technology which will, there is a lot of research which is happening in Israel and US, where they are looking at these alternate ways if they can do away with lithium. In fact, if you Vegas has a huge sand, right? And what they are trying to do is they are trying to store the solar energy in a kind of a sand panel and then use that. So a lot of these experiments are still happening. But as you rightly said, again, this will become scarce. We need to have a system because again, disposing a battery is a hazard. So all these things are there, and I think many of you have noticed that now every company has somebody called Chief Sustainability Officer. So this is again, there's more of talking which is happening today, not much work, but this is going to be the future, and you have to be very mindful of this. In fact, if you look again, wherever there's ambiguity, there's consulting price. So we get a lot of projects on ESG. We are also figuring out what needs to be done, but understand that wherever there's ambiguity, wherever there is uncertainty, I think that is where consulting actually thrives a lot. Because a lot of people don't know what to do, but again, that is where we are all trying to learn collectively. Yeah, sure.
So I would just like to add up on this question. Yesterday I read that Tata Sons chairman, Mr. Chandrasekharan, there is a statement that Tata is going to soon manufacture semiconductor chips in India. So how would you rate this move from an industry perspective and as well as from the academic perspective? Do you think that India has that skilled labor to manufacture semiconductor chips?
I think that's a great question. I will just look at it this way. Few years ago, we wanted a supercomputer from US, but they refused to give us. We built our own. Second thing, if you look at it, India as a nation, nobody thought that we will be able to launch a satellite. We did that, right? So it's not that India doesn't have the skill set. Only thing is that the policy, the ambiguity, everything has. See,
Semiconductor is a very funny industry because 2008, 2009, there was excess of supply. And companies like Global Foundries and all that became bust. And now suddenly when everybody moved to digital, now there's a huge shortage. And this is going to even out. So we have to be very, very careful about the capacity. Because once you increase the capacity of a semiconductor thing, I think it's you need to operate at a certain minimum level to at least cover your fixed costs. So we have to be very careful on how much we will produce. Because again, maybe tomorrow what will happen is the demand comes down. Again, what will we do? So we made the statement, we will be able to do it, but we have to be very careful on the capacity expansion. Because we don't want something like 2008, 2009 where there is excess capacity in the market. We don't want what happened to EdTech. EdTech, right, because of COVID. Now everything is open, right? You don't really need an online thing. A lot of companies, unfortunate that there are layoffs and all that, but that is, you have to be very careful on how much. In fact, if I look at Aggarwal, they started something, wanted to start a fab city. But to manufacture a fab, you need lots of water. Aggarwal doesn't have so much water. So we couldn't do it. We have to look at all this. Yeah, sure.
So now, if you see the car industry,
Uh-huh.
it's moving towards the EV, right?
Yes.
And we don't have an ecosystem.
Right.
Where to charge my car. So, from supply chain perspective, I build a whole ecosystem. Then suddenly someone is telling now hydrogen cars will come. Right? I think Hyundai and Toyota are working.
Yes,
on it.
yes.
So in this way, when a new technology comes, how supply chains have to reinvent themselves. When the products are having a shrinking life cycle of so fast, how the supply chains have to integrate themselves, with these moves what I have.
I think that way we will have to, as a supply chain, we will have to segment our, like what we do in a customer wise, segment the customer. Similarly, for a supply chain, we will have to segment it. If the supply chain is segmented, maybe this kind of supply chain caters to this kind of industry. But as a company, if I'm doing both EV and hydrogen, both will need a different supply chain. And I cannot have one supply chain catering to that. Supply chain segmentation will be critical. And I can choose whether I want to get into EV or I just want to do only hydrogen. That's the risk because so that's why the supply chain segmentation is a possible answer to all this. Not one size fits. So that's where it borrows heavily from customer segmentation. Yes, sure.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Again, adding additional point to this EV and sustainability. Actually, more than a question, it's just something that I heard. I just want to clarify. I just met one kind of environmentalist kind of a person. So what he was talking to us about this EV and so what he said was, and that's what I wanted to ask. When we go for this EV, now for charge, suppose a lot of EVs come. But for charging the batteries, anyway we will have to generate more power.
Absolutely.
And currently the source of power is fossil fuel, in coal. So it is like, so in that sense then EV is really not sustainable.
Right.
Except for the fact that the emissions are less. So I mean, actually it looks like it's back to square one. So to charge more batteries, if you have millions of cars, and with the growth of India, so many millions of cars comes, the batteries will need to be charged, and so frequently probably. So when we have hundreds of stations everywhere, so charging the batteries will need more charging, fossil fuel burning. So in a way it's not really
Possible thing if we can have these solar panels, if that can sustain it. Otherwise, you are absolutely right that we are burning more fuel. In fact, Europe, they banned the EV vehicles because winter they need power for the engines. So I think I think whenever some trend comes in, everybody tries to jump it without looking at the whole picture. Because everybody knows that we will need more power, but people have not thought through. So I think we are trying to jump with the gun real fast. So maybe it's a journey. We will need to have a more long-term target rather than trying. Because now everybody is jumping into the ESG right now. I
I don't know what's happening, but I think you are right.
Only thing is that emissions are.
Emissions is one, but the thing is, the source of supply also needs to be.
And maintenance of the cars is lesser, so that way it's an advantage, but energy wise, sustainability is a good.
Exactly, maybe. See, it's all again, everybody's trying to get a pie of the market. So that's even hydrogen, you'll have to look at how feasible, how hydrogen fuel is going to work. In fact, give an example, when I say water, so a lot of times, as Mayur mentioned that distillery water, so people tried experimenting that why can't we take sea water, there's so much, try to do it. The technology was expensive, research has been going on, but it's not working. Maybe we'll have to figure it out. Okay. Don't have a straight answer, but you're right that we are burning more fuel to charge these emissions. Which may not be sustainable.
For the benefit of the audience, so you worked in brick and mortar companies also.
Yes, yes.
And then you went into tech companies.
Yeah.
Even though of course you.
Yes.
You know. So how do you advise students? You do advise students to go into this kind of industry, the manufacturing industries, logistics industry, who are doing work at the classroom, or you would say that people are most companies coming here are IT companies, tech companies. So how do you advise the students?
If you ask me, maybe initial years, I think you should spend in a brick and mortar, because if you don't know how things work, I think it's very difficult for you to really visualize how things. Because I remember I spent some time with Lafarge Cement, and my job was to count the number of bags, how it goes in a railway wagon. And there's a science to it. And when we are designing the next set of rakes for the cement industry, I think that became very handy. So even if you work in a tech company, it's fine. You don't have a choice always. But don't shy away from dirtying your hands. If they ask you to visit a customer doing the shipbuilding, go there. At least the advantage with the consulting or a tech is you get to see different industries. I've spent 1 year with Suguna Poultry, and I know how you actually you have the chicken industry is very funny because you have 32 grandparents which are interbred to get that taste of a broiler, and it has to be so. I learned a lot about the industry. That's the advantage with a tech or a consulting firm, that you see different industry, and that makes you ready for the CXA job 5 years, 10 years time. But don't shy away from doing, because I used to feel very bad that as an MBA grad, I was counting cement bags. But understand that for Unilever, the chairman, he has also sold sachets and shampoos in a village, traveling in trucks. Don't shy away, because there is no shortcut to that. It's not that you sit in an AC room and do strategy. It doesn't work. Because in our offerings, we don't do strategy projects alone. It's strategy and operations together. Because if I look at my revenue model, 50% is I get paid if I do a strategy. 50% I get paid only if I are able to have those outcomes which I promised. I will give you 8% savings. If I do that, then only I get my money. Otherwise, I don't get paid. So strategy is never alone. Strategy and operations together. So don't shy away from dirtying your hands. Go wherever you want to, because you are young, you can travel. Because as you age, consulting becomes a little difficult, because sleep, erratic food habits. It looks fancy that you are living out of a suitcase. It's not that fancy. It looks fancy that you are staying in expensive hotels. It's not the case anymore. Everybody is cost conscious. Again, I am giving the other side also. But yes, it's a very industry which is steep learning curve. You will learn a lot, but long hours. But you are young, you can still do it. It's now difficult for me. I've been doing this for the last 20, 22 years. But again, it's a choice, because I, as a mechanical engineer, a lot of people from my batch went to TCS. I wanted to do a hardcore job. I went to Tata Motors, built trucks for 3 years. And that has helped me a lot in my career. because I understand the technique of labor, I understand a lot of the concepts which we use on industrial engineering. I learned at Tata and still I use it in my work. Similarly, in a Lafarge cement, cement is a very tough industry because you deal with all kinds of people. You deal with mafia, you deal with dons. So again, that was a learning for me. Tough industry made me tougher. And then, of course, I joined a tech firm, FORSE, and I got to see the world. So I'm always grateful to that company because I could see the world going forward. I think that's a nutshell. So don't shy away from. You may not have a choice in a campus of what job you get, but don't leave a campus without a job. You will find your way. And what I have seen data says, any MBA grad changes his or her job after 9 months. I don't say that, I don't recommend that because there's only one person in our batch who has not changed a job for the last 17, 18 years. But typically, even if you land up in a job which is not your dream job, you will find your way. You have survived this course, you will survive it.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful session. I'm sure that all of us have had a lot of learnings from this, the most important one being not to shy away. And we now move on to the next segment of the conference, which is Corporate Insights. The Corporate Insights section of the conference aims to share competitive intelligence from the field of supply chain to enlighten us about the global trends. Today, we have among us Mr. Dhawal Moghe, who is the head of supply chain distribution at McDonald's. Dhawal sir holds a bachelor's in engineering in industrial biotechnology and an MBA from NITI Mumbai. He has over 10 years of supply chain experience in sales and operations and other functional areas such as planning, logistics, distribution, and manufacturing. He has also worked as a Deputy General Manager of Supply Planning at Godrej Consumer Products Limited. It is a privilege for us to host you, sir. We invite Mr. Dhawal Moghe, sir, to the dais to enlighten us.
Wonderful speech. Hello everyone. Dear faculty members and students from the Operations Supply Chain Management Department of Somaiya Institute of Management, Managing Committee of Global Supply Chain Management Conference 2022, FORSE committee members, Sushila Krishna ma'am and members from SC Next Forum, distinguished guests, members of the audience, viewers of this online YouTube feed, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here. And it's my esteemed pleasure to be a part of this August gathering. Today, I'm thrilled to be a part of this conglomerate here, which is very much enthusiastic about how does the future look like about supply chain and its adjacencies. When I was given to understand that I need to deliver a presentation on this and a talk on this, I was thinking very hard, and frankly I was thinking what can a person from my limited experience can talk to you about this aspect which you already are very much in sync with. And after thinking for probably a couple of days, something struck me, and then I realized you guys are already a generation of the mobile, of the digital tech era, You already know many things which I already am aware of. What else can I offer to you? In fact, I will be very, very upfront. I come from the output generation. I'm not very sure whether you guys even have an output account, because output flows long back. Probably the first account you would have had would have been Facebook, Instagram, and the likes. Frankly, I still don't have Snapchat with me on my account. So that's an embarrassment. But anyways, I still am on Facebook for sure. So how does this generation look like, to supply chain from a future context? Let me know if I have been able to make an honest attempt on this. Let's have the next slide, please. Okay, so when they look at the future, the past is something which we have to remember. It has to be ingrained into us. Time and again, numerous people have mentioned this. There have been instances in world wars when the supply chains have taken a huge pivotal turn in many different realms. America today is a superpower because of 2 or 3 major things. See, until Pearl Harbor happened, it was not even a part in the war, but it was the central part in the war machinery. It was making all the kinds of stuff which was required for making the war continue, go on. It was doing all the right economic steps which it should have taken and it was taking. It was funding the war effort by making lots of cars, machineries, tanks, trucks, whatnot, even artillery for that matter. So supply chain did go through a significant change during that. That was World War I and World War II. What happened in World War III? Do you say World War III? Has it happened? I think yes, it just did. COVID was World War III, if I think from that angle. The only difference, it was not 2 countries or 2 sets of countries which were against each other, it was humanity against a common enemy. And that war stayed on for 2 years, 2 good long years. And that also made us learn the importance of supply chains. Do we have a clicker here or something with a pointer? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at an index of global supply chain pressures by a global agency, it is not India based, but it gives you a sense of how the worldwide supply chains have been. Now, if you look, typically the variation here was around 10 to 15% against the standard line, which was something which the supply chains of the world were at home with. What happened here? Yes, this was World War III which I was talking to you about. And that got exacerbated with the Russia-Ukraine crisis further on. Now, what future holds on in terms of war, etc., I will leave it to the political pundits to comment on. But the key takeaway here is, while COVID changed the lives of almost 94% companies across the world, and that's a significant part, what can we do as a takeaway to understand how does the future take from here? And as some philosophers have always maintained, that life can only be understood backwards, but it has to be moved on forwards. How do we understand and learn from our histories is what we would want to learn further, right? So this is something about me, and let me give you a sense of my background over the last 12 odd years. I've been fortunate to have worked and I have got inspired from the stalwarts in their field. So I have met people like Sandeep, Mayur, and so many people, and the kind of domains I have worked in has given me that perspective which I will be glad to talk with you. Also, earlier I was working with the FMCG sector. Recently I moved to food chain sector, which is QSR. Now this switch also made me understand there is a lot of supply chain nuances which change and we have to adopt when external circumstances change. But how do we get smart supply chains into all of this? Now let me give you a zoomed out view first of all. See, there could be many paradigms about how supply chains should run. But as I mentioned, when COVID happened, almost all of them fell flat on their face. Let's admit that. There were aspects on just in time. There were models which were talked about like Hiratsu model of Japan, right? There were aspects of lean manufacturing. There were things which were being talked about, Six Sigma, etc. But when these kind of things happen, then all hell breaks loose. What happens then? How do we as professionals manage these kind of events? Okay. Now, there is no single or a simple answer to all of this. But the point is, the smartness of supply chain has to kick in. How do you define smart? One way is to have the acronym of specific, measurable, assignable, realistic and time-related things. But the way I look at it is, how do you make it more intuitive? How do you make it more resilient? And how do you make it more adaptable? So, see, there will be a lot of opinions coming back and forth. Even during that time when there was a 10 to 15% variation happening in things like the overall composite index for supply chain pressures, still then also there were paradigms in which that number was not at the zero line. And believe me, if there is even a 2 or 3% of variation, it means there has to be a review of the budgets, there has to be a review of the processes, and there has to be a review of metrics which are in place. And how do we make our supply chain smart then? You may say, let's have IoT, let's have sensors. Yes, of course, those will be the mainstay. But as I mentioned, you guys are already there. I'm sure the first company where you will be landing up after this, after placements, they will already have these IoTs of the world installed. In fact, when I started my career, at that point of time, BS4 trucks were there, Bharat Standard 4 trucks. And then BS6 came, and BS4 trucks today, they cannot fly in NCR region of India. Government has banned them because of pollution related aspects. So what to do? See, BS6 is now a baseline for things already. How do you manage all these things? So, the major philosophy change in our mindset has to be to really identify what is the inspiration of being smart. How do you make yourself smart? How do you make the organization which you are working with smart? And to do that, the attempt here is to give you a sense of a totally different example. Okay? Just for a moment park whatever you have learned till now and bear with me here. Now, imagine an organism, a person, like me, like you, the person sitting next to you. That person has got a system of systems in place. And that system of systems is the best supercomputer there is already. It is a system which has supply chains already working in tandem every microsecond of the day. From the day the person is conceived till the time that person drops dead is the time that supply chain in his body is working completely non-stop. Okay? There are sometimes errors when you fall sick or there are certain other aspects, but to a large extent, the uptime of that system, now we normally call that uptime and we take pride in 99.98% of SLAs, but that uptime of the system is even more than that. And if you imagine the kind of complexity that entire system carries, it's mind-boggling. If you look at each cell, there is an entire factory which is going on in that cell. Okay? Then if you were to compare that with what happens in our case in terms of organizations which run brick and mortar supply chains or electronic supply chains for that matter, it is very, very similar. Just think about the parallels which are there. You have the DNA, basically, which is a parallel for the culture of the business itself. And then you have cells which are actually employees. Now the trillions of cells which are working there in your body are parallel to the workforce which you have. And then there are tissues, the organs, the functions which are making up what the individual is. Similarly, if you were to take that same parallel, you are at the level of the business which this is carrying. And as you grow more and zoom out more, you come to the level of society, the world order finally. Now, where does supply chain come into being here? Supply chain is the one which links all of this here. And as you increase the zoom out, the variability of it keeps on increasing. The complexity of it increases. And the interaction between all these systems keeps on increasing. Now, we all keep on hearing about the terminology called VUCA, VUCA, right? What is it? Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. All of this is actually happening here every second. And how does it even get managed? Let me give you a glimpse of how these takeaways of supply chain perfectness can help you take those calls in the future. Now, the human body is a miracle. And when I say miracle, it has got all these moving parts which do take away all of this work in separate compartmentalized zones. So the first takeaway which we should understand is Industrial Engineering 101. It says differentiation makes things work perfectly. If you differentiate between different aspects of the business, that makes efficiency come into the play. If you do not, then it will always be a jumble. And that's what manufacturing employs heavily on. What they do is, they have differentiated jobs for each functions. An accounting fellow is not expected all the times to be at the shop floor. A shop floor person is not expected to be selling in the market. And that's why the differentiation in nature also is something which everybody needs to be aware of. These systems are actually working as supply chain proxies within our body at every point of time. And what is the impact of it? This creates a differentiating advantage to us as a species. Now imagine this differentiation would not have been there. What have we been there? We would have been just a jumbled up soup. We would not have been able to achieve anything. This differentiation helps us gain a kind of an advantage in terms of many other aspects. That's why we are better than a bacteria. That's why we are somewhat better than a monkey. Now, whereas a monkey will also have these differentiated systems, but the difference will be probably in the nervous system. The nervous system will have a specific part, probably in the cerebrum or in the cortex. It will have something which differentiates it better and adapts to the situations better. Okay? Now, if you were to come to some of these aspects, say this nervous system. Okay? Now, nervous system is the brain of the entire organism. Okay? Now, this brain, pardon me if it is sounding somewhat of a medical lingo, but you will see where I want to reach with that. There are two parts of the brain or the nervous system. The first part is called the one which is parasympathetic. This part, the parasympathetic. Now, this is the function of the brain which plans, it thinks, it deliberates on things, and then it gives the communication, okay, you did this. Okay? It does not act in the spur of the moment. So when you learn a vehicle, when you start learning a vehicle, you will all mess it up. I'm sure, even I did. But once you have learned it, it gets into this zone of parasympathetic part. And it knows this part is now ingrained in your mind, and whenever you have to say pedal a cycle, your movement already starts that way. The other part is something which reacts. Okay? Now, say for example, there is a sudden threat, and you need to immediately get charged up to fight. Say a tiger is jumping at you, and you have to fight that tiger or run. Probably, I would run with that case. The other system, which is the sympathetic system, that kicks into play. Imagine the same analogy for supply chain. Supply chain is not only about inventory management, it is also about how do you manage your contracts. And that's why the area where the planning part is most important is, say for example, how do you deal with contracts. Now Mayur was mentioning in the morning how various players have actually changed the scene of the game, in which the various players at a click of a button are able to give you spot rate contracts. That's the temptation now which we have. But how do you do a trade-off between that opportunity versus the stability? Okay? That is most important to understand. Your body keeps on doing it even without asking you. Do you hear a voice in your head saying, do you learn, do you hide, do you plan? No. This is the way the body does it automatically, and that's the inspiration which we should carry. Similarly, say for example, there are production schedules which get communicated to the factories, but then one fine day the sales guy comes up, the marketing guy comes up and says, see, I don't want this product, I want something else. What do you tell him? Boss, tomorrow is the launch. What do you expect? The production has already happened. It is already in the warehouse. Tomorrow it will be hitting to you in your distributor godown. Do you want me to stop that dispatch? He said, no, I don't want. I know the market has changed overnight. Do me something, give me a 5 rupee discount on that price. What do you do then? That is where this part comes in, the delayed differentiation through a value-added service at the warehouse. Okay, now this is where the reaction part is coming into play. Okay, you cannot do anything, now you cannot plan, now it's an execution time. The reaction part has to be calibrated. You cannot promise moon to the carrier. But what you can do is you can say, fine, this is how we stand and this is the solution which I have available here. Whenever you get stuck up in such kind of problems in which you don't see any way out, just think, what would your body do? If an unforeseen circumstances comes up, what would your brain do? What message would it give to that? Okay? But a lot of it is actually bad for everyone. So if every time there is a tiger leaping up to you, you'll always have high adrenaline. You'll always keep on pumping too much of energy, passion into whatever you are doing. Probably you are running for all that matter. But adrenaline will keep on pumping up, and eventually it is going to kill you. You might not get killed from the tiger, but you will get killed from your very own adrenaline. Okay? And that's why it has to be used. This reaction part has to be used very, very sparingly and very, very judiciously. Okay? That's why the game changers in all of this paradigm are how do you plan. The planning process is the most important, in which at least it gives you 95% confidence on the process which you have put. You should not be in a position in which you are just firefighting all of the days. That's why IBP processes, which are integrated business planning processes, are extremely important. I still see a lot of organizations which don't give due weightage to this, or probably they do it in silos, etc. Unfortunately, we cannot live without those right now. Okay? Similarly, S&OP processes. Now, this is an offshoot of IBP. IBP sets a bit level higher above the S&OP, but at least S&OP has to be the basic part. S&OP is sales and operations planning, which is fundamentally a handshake between sales and marketing targets, their aspirations, and what supply chains can deliver in return. So what are the commitments which you are giving in terms of a forward visibility of months or quarters or years? That becomes a part. Secondly, there are aspects of heuristics versus optimizations. As a supply chain professional, you will always feel tempted to use optimizations. You will always see a lot of fancy jargon about saying this is a tool which gives you a magic wand, just like Harry Potter's, and it will say just do Wingardium Leviosa and everything will be all hunky dory. The system will spit out an output which is going to make you feel so good about it. Believe me, guys, optimization does not work every time. 70 to 80% of the times when you actually are in the business, the input parameters which are required for optimization themselves cannot be fed into the tool. Why? Because the tools are developed with a certain thought in mind, with a certain logic in mind. When you do business normally, those thoughts, those conditions keep on changing so rapidly that by the time you start deploying a tool of optimization, the world changes. Okay? And that's why the due advantage to heuristics is also important. The heuristics part is the reacts part, as I was mentioning. The optimization part is the plans part. Your body continues doing it without even thinking it twice. For example, you are playing cricket. A ball comes at you. Do you think for a moment whether it is coming at your leg side or your off side? Whether it is a bouncer or is it a half volley? You just do it, right? What is it? Is it optimization or is it heuristics? It is heuristics. And that is something which you have to keep on doing in many parts of the world. When you are driving a car and suddenly something comes in, you have to dodge it, right? You can plan at that. Apart from this, yes, to improve your overall quality of life as being a supply chain professional so that you don't burn out, of course you do have to have a rigor on the improvement in demand, supply and other forecasting accuracies for sure. Because then you are able to plan with a much better confidence. Okay? You don't have to rely only on last minute half formation, last second sixers. Okay? There are two hormones in our body. I'm not very sure whether you all have heard about it, but these are dopamine and cortisol. And I will be discussing more about it subsequent things also. Now, the dopamine part is a reward hormone. So imagine you are hungry, after your lunch you again have a small chocolate. Why do you need a chocolate? Tell me. You are already full, but you feel good about it. Similarly, when you want, you have done a good job in the last examination and then you want to have some sweet, you find it good. Or probably it's a weekend and you want to switch on Netflix and watch a show or a web series. You find good about it. How does that feeling come in? That is the dopamine which your brain releases in very, very small amount of quantities. But it's a magic drug which your body alone synthesizes. You don't get dopamine from some pharmacy, okay? You get it from your own brain. But the brain is so well adept into giving that specific dosage only, which makes you feel good and for a short period of time. On the other hand, if you are going to be procrastinating, like I do a lot, okay? When I was making this slide, actually I spent 2 days not doing anything. Then, yesterday evening, the cortisol came in. The stress hormone started kicking in and it rang a bell into my mind. अब नहीं करेगा तो कुछ नहीं होने वाला तेरा. You will fall flat. Okay. So then the stress hormone started kicking in. That motivated me. Okay, fine. I have to make this right now. Okay. Last minute study, all of us did. Okay. That is where the cortisol comes in. It's 15 minutes before the examination starts, and you have to just rush through the last minute notes. Okay. The body does it. How does the supply chain does it? You have to figure out. What is the dopamine of the supply chain? What is the motivation which you give to your team members, to your stakeholders? That is extremely important. And sometimes you have to also give them stress, because some people have to be given a push, right? Okay. Now this is another system, which is the circulatory system. The circulatory system is effectively bringing blood into the aspects where it is really required. Okay. In terms of supply chain parlance, what is it? Goods, materials, and the associated service along with it. Now, I'm sure a lot of people would be aware of this. There is a concept called DDMRP, which is dynamically changing the amount of inventories which you want to keep at strategic nodes in your supply chain. Okay. Now that is a offshoot of the theory of constraints, which basically says if there is a bottleneck, kill it. Identify the bottleneck first and then kill it. Of course, once you kill it, the bottleneck will shift to some other location. The bottleneck will keep on moving within the supply chain, but at least you will keep on making improvements in the overall supply. There will come one point of time probably in which the bottlenecks will not be localized to one node, but it will be across all the supply chain, and that is called the laminar flow. In engineering we call that as laminar flow. Here in this case it is called seamless flow, no bottleneck flow. That is the holy grail of supply chain, in which you say, okay, I am not having any bottlenecks. The bottleneck is the demand itself. Whatever you want, I will be able to produce you. Okay, that is the vision of every supply chain professional, to say in any SOP meeting, see, I don't have any constraints. You tell me what I have to make whenever you want to make. Okay. So this all stuff keeps on happening in the body all the time. The arteries, the veins, the heart are always in sync with what is required at all the times. Now the warehouses are the strategic inventory exchange mechanism levers there. They are constantly exchanging the oxygen and carbon dioxide in the exact same proportion. What is required? The diffusion mechanism, you won't even feel about it, but it is already taking care of whatever is required. So the 21% of oxygen is homogenized and then mixed through a reverse osmosis exchange between 21% of oxygen and 0.3% of CO2. That is the mechanics which is already going on. Now, what if there is some problem there? Okay, that's where the re-optimization aspect comes in. So suppose there is a problem with the lungs. How do you then manage it? Then the optimization process already starts in the body. The arteries and veins, they constrict or deflate to that extent to make that balance again maintained. That is called homeostasis. And not only that, the heartbeat changes, right? In distribution, what we say, sometimes it is good to have a truck moving on a lane every day. Yes, that's good for a certain aspect of a business. But in certain other aspects, it does not make sense. For example, in FMCGs, wherever there is a threat of market share being lost, it is always advisable to have a truck movement every day. But from another aspect, say from USA, from where I come now, there it does not make sense. What we would rather have is a truck which goes fully utilized and then only hit a certain point. But that fully utilization means your projection accuracies have to be spot on. You cannot make even a case worth of error there. Okay. Now the heartbeat is the proxy of it. The distribution angle comes in there. Also, how do we dynamically adjust this? That once per day or once per week is not set in stone. It has to be changed as per the need of the situation. And if for any reason, for that matter, if there is a loss of oxygen, or say there is a risk of non-supply of oxygen, the body always knows what to do. It prioritizes those elements of the entire physical structure to, say, the heart or the brain, etc., to move oxygen to the relevant parts on priority. Similarly, when supply chains are under stress, the priority matrix has to take in. But that priority matrix is also not static. It is dynamic. So, for example, a lot of times when you are hungry after having a huge amount of meal, you feel drowsy, post lunch especially. What happens is the oxygen has been sucked up by the brain too much, and that's why it becomes in an overload kind of a state. right? That's why the rebalancing of these oxygens, the CO2s, etc. have to come in quickly. And that's why when we say optimal inventories, a periodic review of the norms also are important. You cannot just avoid that. You cannot just fire and forget. It has to be a continuous review. And try to reduce the buffers also. Because the buffers are there for a purpose. Those are to ensure availability of supply. But remember, every inventory is a drag on the working capital of a company. Okay? You have only 2 lungs, you don't have 10. Right? Because 10 would be overkill. Even 3 would have been an overkill. 2 are just enough. Similarly, your number of warehouses have also to be in the right number and have to be reviewed. Coming to another part, which is the digestive system. Okay. Now this is similar to your manufacturing operations. If you don't get food, what happens? They become cringy. There is a lot of acidity which we have to face, right? Because your body expects at a certain time food to be made available. Why? The stomach has an internal lining which secretes hydrochloric acid that is constantly getting made even if you don't have anything in your stomach. Now what happens if at a certain point of time you don't have anything to eat or to digest, the stomach itself starts dissolving itself. So the stomach is eating itself, and that creates the pain which you hear as a grumbling in the beginning, but then it increases further on. Now a factory, for example, if it does not get the raw materials, or there is a supply shortage, or there is a quality related problem, that's a loss of efficiency. And hence it is always important to keep the factories always stocked up to the right inventory levels. Even a single minute of production stoppage because of material unavailability should always be avoided, remember. Because it's not just a consumption center, it is a service center also. There are people who have been brought in ships, the contractual manpower, etc. There are utilities, electricity, power, etc. which are going on. And those have to be always be utilized in the most efficient manner possible. Otherwise it's a waste. Okay? What about the type of food which we are eating? Now we all know carbs makes us fat, and proteins is something which we now deem as healthy. But the body converts any excess of carbohydrates to fats. Any excess of proteins also gets converted into fats. That's an auto-regulating mechanism which we have. Similarly, in supply chains, when we talk about cycle stock, that is the base amount of stock just to maintain just-in-time inventories. Then you have safety stock layered above it, which takes into account any foreseen supply or demand variabilities. The third part is the extra stock over and above the norm, which should be ideally be avoided. So, in the same parlance, the extra stock which you see here is equivalent to the fats which we have. Now, any human, the fat should be minimal. I am not saying make it zero, it should be minimal. Similarly, in any inventory proposition, the extra stock should be as minimal as possible. And of course, the inventory policies, just in times are there, strategic build-ups are on the other side of the extreme. Pre-COVID, nobody used to talk about strategic build-up. Now, in every discussion there is a chapter on strategic build-up. How do we make sense out of this? And that's where the paradigm changes. Earlier, the cost of working capital, the cost of carrying inventory never ever used to get factored in. Now it does. Earlier it was just pallet rentals or square foot of warehousing space. However, now we also do a trade-off of how much the working capital days of a company is going to get impacted or because of a strategic buffer builder which we are doing. And then for such kind of cases, either it is the CFO or the CEO or the MD who signs off on these things. So guys, remember, whatever decisions you are taking, those are getting heard. The only point is you have to make it available, you have to make them heard in the right format. Then it will make interest of the people to be heard into it. Okay? Coming to another great system which we have, respiratory system. How many seconds can you hold your breath? 6, 10, 15, 20 seconds, 60 seconds, okay. 1 minute, 2 minutes, max. Okay, not more than that. That's a non-negotiable thing. You cannot go without your breath after a certain amount of time. Similarly, a business cannot go without cash flow generation for a long amount of time. Of course, there are certain VCs who know this, and that's why they are ready to burn the cash in the initial parts of the businesses, wherever there is a Series A, Series B funding, etc. But that is not an infinite kuber ka dhan which is going to get given to them, right? It is going to end one day, and when that happens, it will be known to everybody how badly in a situation we all are standing in. And that's why the procure to pay cycle is extremely important. The procure to pay cycle has to be as much automated as possible. When I tell you why. See, when you are breathing, even now I am speaking, I am not giving even a single percentage point of my mental bandwidth towards how I am breathing. Because nature has already given us that evolutionary advantage in saying, you keep on breathing, our heart, our entire stuff here connected to it will keep on doing it through the parasympathetic nervous system. Need not worry about it. It is automated. The same system funda can be used here also. The procure to pay thing is, unfortunately, I see many organizations today who are still struggling with it. It has to be automated completely. The rates of products, the way of invoicing, the ways of doing goods receipts, etc. have to be automated. I think there is a huge potential here in terms of AI-based automations into all of this. Today, there are many aspects in which there is a manual invoice making or a manual invoice registering in the system when the product comes in. I think that's where a huge effort on the making of this involuntary or automated would go a long way. Okay, but things sometimes fail. However, automation you would like to bring in there will be an aspect in which there will be exceptions coming. But then, how do you deal with those? So the first level of exception has to be managed through probably a curation of the orders. Others could be a monitoring of the purchase prices which are happening. So say you have contracted 100 rupees from the vendor and the vendor sends in an invoice which is 102. The difference of 2 rupees has to be highlighted immediately to the right stakeholder and closed within the shortest time possible. If it does not, it creates as a burden on the book of accounts as a provision. And too much of a provision in your book of accounts is always unhealthy. It's scowled down upon by auditors. Okay? Similarly, your body gives you that signal the moment there is a problem. If there is a dust particle which has entered your pharynx, immediately you start coughing. That is the body's way of signaling you there is something wrong. Okay? Use that fundamental analogy into bringing up these exception management practices in whatever you do in the future. Even after doing all of this, I'm sure once in a blue moon there will be a crisis. Okay? Now crises do happen. How do we deal about it? Let's understand how does our body deal about it. The same rule of fair share kicks into play. The body prioritizes where to send that limited availability of oxygen, and how does it manage is through a lot of intricate mechanisms. But those start happening within a click of a second. Okay? Same way, the click of a button aspect has to be there in the business also. If there is a crisis, the relevant people have to be notified and sought for feedback through whatever channel the organization feels fit. But it has to take into place for sure. The next system which we have is endocrine system. This is the system which is basically the hormones, and believe me, medical science still is in dark on a lot of these aspects. Why is it in dark? We have done a lot of things. We have done electron microscopy, we have done all the kinds of quantum mechanics of the world. Why is this different? The biggest problem here is A plus B does not mean C here. it means z plus y plus alpha plus beta to the power something else. Okay? When I say that, it means it is extremely complicated because there are many factors which are in play. One hormone impacting another. This is how supply chains are. This is how businesses are. Today, a stock price of an organization, you might not see it to be something which will change anything in your life, but probably next quarter, that might change your budgets. Now, you might say, what does our stock price have to do of a particular organization with how I am planning my operations? But guys, this is how stuff works. And the reason why it is so important to understand this kind of a system is, which is interconnected, you need to have your ears on the ground. The customer's feedback is the most important part. Similarly, your body keeps on listening to all these signals at all the times. So the customer feedback is the most important part which you, wherever you are, in whatever function you are, you need to have a close ear to. Second part is the management's vision. If that vision is not what you are expecting, then better be alive. Okay? The third part is the type of response which you can provide. Now our body has two types of responses. One is the immediate one, the other is slow and deliberate one. It is very similar to what we have seen in the central nervous system aspect, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Here also there are neurotransmitters and then there are neuropeptides. So these two have different specificities on which they work on. And you need to have these kind of leverage tools available at your disposal. So tomorrow, if management comes and says the customer feedback has changed, how do you deal with it? You should have that arsenal in your mind. There has to be you who should know the customer feedback before somebody comes and tells you the customer feedback is not what it should be. Okay? And finally, of course, the dopamine and the cortisol part, which I was mentioning earlier. How do you make an interaction play between these two, within your teams, within your stakeholders? Because finally, see, we all are working for us. We are making money for us, our families, etc., for our betterment. We need to get some rewards, but also we need to have that motivation to excel in whatever we do, right? Because at the end of the day, people will be normalized on whatever bell curves or whatever kind of performance metrics there are. However, it is important for us to understand the team dynamics here. The glands which are in our body know this very well. They know which function to first of all motivate and which part of the body let go. And that's where the intrinsic Maslow's pyramid, which you would have gone through, comes into play. The genesis of Maslow's pyramid comes from here. What excites us? What motivates us as human beings? Okay? And that's why things like the tangible impacts and the non-tangible impacts are most important to understand when you are dealing with teams. Okay? But please understand, as I mentioned earlier, A plus B is not equal to C. That's why if something goes wrong, guys, let me give you very clearly, it will be very difficult for you to troubleshoot here. So it is always better to keep a tab on these two things. The first part, customer and management, rest all will be fine. Okay? Okay, another system, which is the immune system. We heard about a lot of this system in COVID times. And let's see how this works. Now this system is something which is the first, second and third line of defense. Okay? And all the times you are getting bombarded by foreign invaders. Similarly, in the marketplace, you are constantly getting bombarded by competitors. How does the body deal with it? The body, first of all, has a very good first line of defense, which is your skin. Okay? If that does not work due to whatever reasons, then there are some non-specific responses. Now, those non-specific responses are basically saying, I will kill anything which is seeming to be a foreign body. It does not differentiate. Come what may, picks up a gun and start shooting. Okay. Similarly, in internal case, in case of say an organization, the best way how supply chains can deal with such kind of invaders or say process inefficiencies which creep up after crossing the first line of defense is to have a very strong mechanism of internal audits for cost benchmarkings. The cost benchmarkings need to be across functions. I have seen where one category manager or a sourcing manager does not know what the other category is dealing with. They might have similar components of raw materials, but they don't know what is the inflation numbers which are coming in the respective categories. One might be taking a 5% inflation, the other might be taking a 10% inflation for the next year as a cost benchmark. That is suicide, let me tell you. Okay, because one of the person out of these two is going to get a knack after a while. Similarly, audits are extremely important. See, as supply chain professions, we are sometimes bogged down into our work so much that we feel, oh, audits are a waste of time, or probably it's making my life hell. I'm getting more miserable by the day. But believe me, audits are like those two friends which give you the reality of life, and you can take help of your internal auditors as much as possible. Get that connection done, because then you will be able to understand where are those opportunities of improvement without even somebody else telling you. It's a free of cost assignment from a consultation point of view, believe me. Even after this, if nothing else works, the third line of defense kicks in, which is there are T cells and B cells in our body which are specialized, these are specific agents, and they know one part which they do good. The point is, these T cells and B cells are extremely less frequently seen in our body. Probably it is like a 1 in a billion chance you will encounter a T cell or B cell. However, the effectiveness of those T cells and B cells are extremely great. Okay, one cell will probably help solve your problem for you. But then finally, there is only a limited frequency of occurrence of these T cells and B cells. Similarly, when the first two levers fail, you can always go for reverse options to manage costs. You can go for RFPs, or you can probably look at some external benchmarkings. But believe me, this is the final resort, because whatever comes out as a solution or a way forward from these solutions, you have to accept. Okay, you cannot say I don't accept. So it is better as supply chain professionals we are able to contain everything within the first two. That would be great. Okay. Also, there is one more aspect of this system, which is the lymphatic system. What is lymphatic system? Whatever waste your body generates, normally it goes out to your normal process mechanisms. But there are certain remnants of these fights which with these invaders and our white blood cells go on, and those remnants remain in our body. How does the body dispose of them? It does through a push-based mechanism of taking it through. Okay. Now this push-based mechanism is very unique. The more you walk, the more you exercise, the more you bend your arms or swing your legs, the more that mechanism gets better at. Similarly, in return management for supply chain, this is extremely analogous to it. The return management works through a push, not through a pull. You don't know what the customer is going to return tomorrow. I was talking to some of my friends in Flipkart, and what I came to realize is that almost 40% of the apparel business is return. 40% of the volume of that business is a return-based thing. That's huge. And everything of it is push. There is nothing in pull, which means you have to be at the mercy of the customer. But then, how do the supply chains manage it? That is where the entire trick of the game is. Okay? So, all said and done, my recommendation is do not use the nuclear bomb option. Okay? The third option, which I mentioned, the third kind of defense, as much as possible, try to avoid it. If you can manage the first two levers, great. You can always go for surgical strikes. You can always look for specific things which you can manage. Try to avoid the nuclear option. And this is the final system which we will be dealing today. This is about the structure, about the firmness, about the flexibility. So as the organizations grow, as supply chains grow, there is always a need to be more robust, be more firm in the market, be more confident how we conduct our businesses. And that's where the analogy of bones in our structure comes in. Now, when we are small, we are foot high, and then we grow up to 5 feet, 6 feet, whatever. That gives a sense to the entire organism, saying, okay, now you are maturing. Similarly, the organizations need to have those skeletal frameworks in place. It could be in form of the structure of the company or the way how it deals with its vendors, suppliers, or the customers, or internal stakeholders as well. But that cannot always remain rigid, mind you. It has to be flexible. And the flexible part is inspired from these aspects. Now, these cartilages or tendons are the connecting tissues which make two firm things join together at an edge, and that edge is flexible. So that way you are able to get the benefit of both firmness as well as flexibility. Third thing is muscles. Unless the upper two things are there in place, you won't have muscles, because muscles will collapse. Similarly, till you have a good structure which is flexible to play people around in an organization, you won't be able to make leaps and bounds in business. The first two structures have to be there in place, and then it goes on building up from there. And that's why people have mentioned that it's always better to be surrounded with people better than you. I'm sure a lot of people here are better than me, and that's why I'm fortunate here to be addressing you. Because someday you will be coming up with a brainstorm, great idea, a wonderful idea, and yes, I'll be learning from you, right? So this is how I foresee the smartness from first principles to be evolving. See, when I started thinking about this slide or this presentation, I was inclined to give you a cut off on the technologies which are evolving. But what better technology than you yourself? You are a creature of 4.5 billion years of evolution. The Earth came into being 4.5 billion years ago. And from then, whatever we are today is that absolutely magnificent product which you are seeing today. Okay. However, the supply chains, which I feel which truly will be game changing, of course, they will be adaptive, resilient, be aware of the data which they carry. They will have an innate capability of fitting their forms and functions together with each other. There won't be any disjointed sets. They will be responsive to how things evolve. In fact, the other day I was looking at Chatterjee. I'm not very sure whether you guys would have heard. Has anybody heard about Chatterjee? Elon Musk's latest free for use. So, okay, Elon Musk has an OpenAI kind of a venture, and he has put a chatbot in the public domain for use, and it's great. The kind of chatbots which we have seen till now, and this is a different level altogether. So the best part about it is that chatbot is able to understand your responses in a way none of the other chatbots have been able to, through a structured query language or through a natural language query or in a different way altogether. Google it out, you will understand. But I think the game-changing parts will be those tools and aspects of supply chain which will be self-correcting and forward-looking. When I say self-correcting, it means somewhat near to an AI being sentient, pardon me, okay, but it means the AI or the tool is aware of what it is doing. The second part, it is always forward-looking. See, we as humans sometimes get demotivated because probably what we thought did not work out, or probably we did not get rewarded enough, or whatever. We are emotional creatures to a large extent. But the tools which will make a sense, great sense in the future, will be those which will always look at the future. Now, evolution, as I was mentioning, does not have this part, the forward-looking part for sure. Okay, and the self-correcting part in current aspect of evolution is around 99.5% accurate. Okay, the DNA which gets copied from one generation to another is 99.99% accurate. Suppose this is 100. Then imagine what will be the kind of Six Sigma level efficiency which will come into all these tools as generations progresses. And finally, I would like to conclude this talk by quoting Eisenhower here, because whatever you plan, okay, the plan finally does not mean anything. Believe me, I was an invented planner. I still am to a lot of teams here. But what I realized was the moment you have made the plan, saved the Excel file and sent it to all the stakeholders, it loses its relevance. It's like the Schrodinger cat. It dies the moment you open the box and look at it. Somebody probably would have heard about Schrodinger's cat. That's a thought experiment. But similarly, the plan is something which is useless. Why? Because you know the moment you have made a plan, it is based on assumptions. And those assumptions will always be wrong. The forecast will always be wrong. The demand will not be what you thought to be. The supply will not be what you thought to be. There will be variations. And that's why what matters is the constant process of planning. How do you then change your mindset? Not only yours, your teams around you, the stakeholders which are involved into all of this. How do you bring dynamism into it? At a certain point of time, MRPs were being run on a monthly level. Then they crunched it to 7 days. Then it got crunched to 1 day. Today, when you book an Ola or Uber, it is a second's journey. So the planning engine in Ola and Uber does it in the course of seconds. The trading which happens today, algorithmic based trading in NSE, DSE, etc., it is working on microseconds or nanoseconds probably. How do you do that planning is what will be the final advantage. And how do you ingrain that thought into your supply chain process? That will make you the winner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dhawal sir, for the wonderful session. I'm sure that our audience has gained numerous insights on how supply chain is a key differentiation for businesses in today's world, and how the smart supply chain should also include 3 factors, which is intuitiveness, resilience, and adaptiveness, and also how a supply chain runs parallel to a human body in various ways, as mentioned by sir, and almost on all the topics covered, on all the subjects, like even the human body, the supply chain, and everything. We now open the forum for audience to ask questions.
Thank you, sir. So thank you for the wonderful session. It was great to see how related supply chain to the entire human body. So I had a question which has more of a geopolitical perspective to it. So we got to know that when Russia attacked Ukraine, McDonald's was one of those first companies who decided to move out of the country. And after things went on a good path, I think McDonald's rebranded itself and came with the name Pushno and Toshka, right? Which means taste and that's it. So, sir, do you feel that coming back to country which is of such a large scale, both important being geographically and politically, does coming back to the country, Russia, is more of a supply chain based decision it was taken from the company? Like if it decides to go out of the country, will it hurt the entire structure of the supply chain as part of the company?
Okay. So first of all, let me clarify an aspect here. See, when McDonald's Global Corporation exited from Russia, they did not come back. Even till date, what they did was they sold off their stake to the local DM, the person who had the license to operate it, and they exited it out. And when they exited it out, they said, okay, we will not let you use the brand name of McDonald's. Okay, that is first part. Secondly, supply chains, of course, would get disjointed for sure, because you would not have predicted this kind of a huge change. And if I'm not mistaken, McDonald's Russia has probably 1,000 odd restaurants which they were running. But I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. McDonald's always tries to keep local sourcing as a part of their strategy. And what they do is, when they open up a new geography for business, they build partners within that ecosystem. I'll give you an example for India. For India, 99% of our entire sourcing is India based, very near to our distribution network and customer demands. And the 1% which is still about to be done, it is something which you cannot do anything about because it's fish which comes from Canada. And the processing happens in Kerala. But the processing does happen in Kerala. So apart from that, the farms, the entire ecosystem around it is locally done. And I'm sure, while I don't know the specific around the Russia part, I'm sure they would have done similar kind of things there as well. Probably that is also one of the reasons when the exit happened, there were certain reports, if I remember, there were some aspects on quality, etc., which were coming, but then there were different narrations coming out at the same point of time. So while supply chains do get affected, McDonald's tries not to disrupt in such a way that there is a counterintuitive problem.
Good afternoon. So you connected the idea of cortisol about how stress is being managed in the body. Can the same be done for supply chain? Like if there is a fundamental or grassroots change happening in the supply chain of the industry. So are stress tests being done to the supply chain to see how much it can handle?
Yeah. Okay. So stress tests are in two ways typically. One is the soft test, the other is a hard test. Typically, the soft stress tests are done more from a technology context. And for example, like I was leading the ERP transition recently for my organization here. What we did was stress test on how much volumes or transactions can the system take in terms of orders, in terms of their processing, the shipments and the receipts, and then packing, so on and so forth. So that is something which we make it a point to do before any big launch event, and that becomes our learning for future. Now the hard stress tests are something which are done only if there is a real need to do it. Okay. A hard stress test, I will give you an example which we have done is product recalls. So if there is a quality problem with any of our products, how do we trace it? To first of all at the final store where the product has landed, back to the warehouse, back to the source factory where it came from, and even back from the farm where it came. And that has been attempted for specific categories, and we keep on doing it as a part of our calendar. Sometimes it is announced, sometimes it is unannounced. So the analogy of cortisol as a stress hormone is there.
Thank you for the insightful session, sir, and it was really wonderful to see the analogy between the human body and supply chain. So my question was, these days consumers are growing at the speed of thought. The demand and the kind of things that they want, that keeps changing so rapidly. So how do supply chains, it always the organization has to create more and more categories to keep up with those increasing demand. So how do supply chain create that flexibility and resilience to keep up with that kind of ever-changing demand?
Okay, so typically there is where IBP and SNOP process plays a major role. The IBP is first of all identify and assess where there is a real need of a new product. If there is something which needs a boost from a gross margin perspective and probably a change in the menu alone would help it, then probably a new product is not brought in. However, if there is a real need or there is a potential to capture more market share, then a new product is brought in. But before doing that, supply chains have to go through a complete process of handshaking with R&D teams, then probably doing a prototype of it, do extensive trials, look at feasibilities, go back and forth between the concept and the commercialization phase. Once the commercialization phase is about to get established, then it starts into a commercial phase. And how much does a RM or a component of that cost? What will be the kind of nuances which will be needed to make this operationalized? And once load of those operational things are done and dusted and hammered through, then it comes for the final product. So let me also assure you guys, it is not that you are being asked to be a genie of sorts, but the point is you will always be expected to come with some solutions which are probably, as I mentioned, Harry Potter's magic wand. You have to sometimes do that push and pull out a rabbit out of a hat. But that won't happen every day. Once in a blue moon, yeah.
Sir, I would like to ask, we have been teaching students about the McDonald's supply chain. I don't know whether we can. Could you just throw some light on the supply chain? What are the challenges in short? I assume that nothing perfect. Whatever is in India is case studies, and so many case studies are there.
Okay, so I will distill whatever is there in the public domain. See, McDonalds in India has been operating from the last 25-26 years old. And when this brand came into India, at that point of time, the supply chain was actually non-existent. The lettuce you have seen and enjoyed so much, actually it was not getting made at all in India. There was not even a single farm which could even reach close to that specification. What we had was cabbage. And cabbage is not lettuce. And we needed iceberg lettuce, which is again a specific component of it. The thought which evolved over the course of years was how do we get that farming done? And then we said, okay, which is the best farm available? So the farms in Lahore city, up north, those were contracted, and we started getting those aspects in. In fact, many times in those days, we had to even fly, get those shipments fly to aircrafts, etc., which always came at a bomb of cost. I'll give you another example. For example, French fries. French fries are ubiquitous for McDonald's. Now, you won't believe those potatoes which could make French fries, but actually not possible. This is the geopolitical, the geographical situation in India, because the temperatures were just not giving that kind of a possibility. In fact, one of the guys from McDonald's in those days, a senior guy, he has even quoted and gone on record saying, getting a potato for making French fries in India is like finding an ice cream on the sun, something of that sort, he had said. Okay, so it was impossible, see. But then the thought was, okay, we will figure out a solution, and again we relied on importing potatoes in tons and tons from various people across the globe. And in the meanwhile, we started getting potatoes in-house. So in the western part of India, in Gujarat, we found a sweet spot where things were just right, and then we started cultivating the farms, etc. So that's somewhat on the history, but right now, as I was mentioning, the sourcing is done 99% Indianized only. We have also done away with all the plastic wrappers and coatings which we had, and now we are completely switched on to paper-based cutlery. So the straws, the cups, the plates which you see, or rather the wrappers, the plates still are there, but those are usable. But the ones which get thrown away are completely paper-based, and we are not using plastic in any case. In terms of other aspects of McDonald's, I will say the cold chain aspect is something which is extremely critical. It is an additional cost, it is an additional headache, if you ask me from a logistics point of view, because any truck, we have a system, we have control tower, any truck which stops at any point of time for more than 5 minutes, that gets red flagged on our screens. And then there is a concept of check out the reefer first, the refrigerated apartment, then check what the driver is doing. Because even 5 minutes of that temperature sensitivity violation is unacceptable to us. This is just a glimpse.
Sir, I have I just have two prompt questions. So, firstly, as you're talking about logistics, we can see that the India's 90% of the logistics network is unorganized, and for FMCG company like McDonald's, last mile logistics is a very significant portion of the supply chain. So, how do you measure that, or how do you handle that with this unorganized sector being 90%? And secondly, we can also see that the logistics cost in India is about 13 to 14% of the GDP, and which the government has proposed to bring down to about 8 to 9%. How will this factor into the end cost of consumer? Like, will the products get cheaper, and by how much?
So I'll answer the first question first. See, while we understand in India, organized sector is much less than what you would want to do, but let me also say, unorganized sector being a large part is sometimes a benefit also, because then it gives opportunities to entrepreneurs to try their luck again. Okay. However, things are changing, and there are many players which are coming in the organized sector. We have been doing business from a transportation perspective with organized players till now, because as I was mentioning, the temperature sanctity, the reason why we are so much paranoid about our temperature control mechanism in the trucks, in the warehouse, means that we have to have the best quality available without even a single minute of compromise. And till date, none of the unorganized players have been able to prove the matter. The organized players only have been able to make a dent in the game. That is one. The second part was, can you just repeat the question? What was that?
So I said that as the transportation cost is close to 30 to 40%.
Okay, so the GDP. Okay, so GDP wala 30% to 8%. Okay, so let me give you one aspect of knowledge which I have. Government has recently come up with two things, which is A, the National Logistics Policy. The second is the ONDC network. Now, the logistics policy lays down a lot of fundamentals on how we would, as a nation, want to change the way how logistics happens. It talks about a lot of government support and encouragement to build cold chain warehouses or even other warehouses for that matter. Also, how to debottleneck the national highways or even the state highways for that matter, so that the logistics efficiency improves. The second part is the ONDC, and ONDC is touted to be the transportation equivalent of Flipkart and Amazon. It basically says if you want to book a certain route ad hoc basis pay for a medium term contract, how would you bring that power to the hands of a person who is sitting with his mobile? Now, of course, there are certain players who are already doing it, but government wants to have a much larger role into play, and probably it is because government has learned, this is their experience of the e-commerces which have come in India, that it cannot be just left to the market. There has to be a level playing field in which there is no unnecessarily deep discounting or unnecessarily high surges. There has to be a balanced measure of service versus cost and quality. So what I feel, it will not be an overnight change for sure. But as say GST happened in 2017, see at that point of time there was a lot of resistance, but today we are seeing a lot of benefits coming into play. However, there are challenges, I am not denying it. The portal is not perfect. However, it has changed a lot of things. In fact, a lot of black money evasion also has been able to be identified because of it. Here in ONDC coming in, the efficiencies would play as the time progresses, but government will also have to keep an eye on who are the real benefactors or the benefactors of this advantage. It is finally trickling down to the industry and to the final consumers as well, is the question which we know probably once it happens. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Dhawal, Dhawal sir for the wonderful session. I'm sure this has been quite of a dopamine rush for all of us. We now request Professor Ravindra Valika sir to kindly give a token of gratitude to Mayur sir.
That was in the background. Answer.
We now request Balika sir to kindly give a token of gratitude to Sandeep sir. We now request Professor Balika sir to kindly give a token of gratitude to Dhawal sir. Moving on, we would like to hand over the stage to Sandeep sir to know more about the International Supply Chain Education Alliance ISCEA.
So good afternoon. I will just briefly talk about again. I do not represent ISE as such, but I will just give the background. International Supply Chain Education Alliance is a US-based organization, and we have centers in Dubai, India. India, we were running with Mr. Nikhil Oswal and Sushila. Unfortunately, Nikhil passed away in 2020, and then there was a family which had to be supported. So then I took over from there, and we are running the organizations, and all the proceeds actually goes to the family because his daughter is still studying. So the moment she gets self-sufficient, we will hand it over. But this organization is here to stay. So what we do is, of course, we offer certifications on supply chain because unfortunately in India, not many B schools actually teach supply chains in a big way. Unfortunate, because when I was studying, we had just one course on supply chain management, and I was the only person who wanted a career in supply chain. Everybody wanted to do either marketing or finance. So that was out of peer pressure. And I think e-commerce, everything changed. Now everybody wants to do supply chain. So that way I think to become industry ready, so these are I think some of the short-term courses. Again, ethics is another body which does it. I'm not comparing, but if you look at it, ethics are very, very expensive. So we try to make it affordable for the students because ethics certification cost you around 1 lakh rupees. We try to do it within 6,000 to 7,000 so that it supplements your learning. Other than that, we also support the B schools in India for some of the fest by the winners get some free certifications. We do that. And the third thing is the PTAC prize. If you must have heard about the Gold Rider, the classic, the Gold. So his second book, It's Not Luck, was co-authored by Carol PTAC. Again, she is the one who has started this DDMRP revolution. So whatever proceeds, they have started a fund, and every year there's a PTAC prize which happens, and there's a case study competition versus the India round and the world round, and whoever wins it, they get an all expenses paid trip to US to receive the award. And in the last 6 years, out of the 6 years, 5 times it has been India. NITI has got it 4 times, and I think NMOIS has done it once. So it gives you an opportunity to participate in that because it gives you, it opens you. You will be actually competing with the likes of Wharton and all that. And again, we are there. We have won this 5 times. So these are some of the activities which we do. Other than that, we have a network. Wherever you need
help in terms of maybe guest lectures or any kind of mentoring, any kind of career advice, we offer it. We don't charge anything for that. We are trying to build a community around supply. This is net what we do. Because as a professional, you will understand, you have done well in your life, but understand whatever you have given back to the community, that stands. In fact, Shiv Kumar, who is, was the CEO of Pepsi and my mentor, so if you look at it, he has given back so much. He does these book reviews on LinkedIn, and even if you have not read it, you just spend some 30-35 slides and you will know about the book. So that he is actually giving back, and that's why he is known. He has been the CEO for 16 years out of 32 years in his career. But what stands apart, he has given back so much to the community. This is our way of trying to democratize supply chain, because unfortunately, some of the courses are way too expensive. We don't want to do it. So thank you so much. Again, if you need any more details, you can always reach out to Sheila, or I can also help you. I'm always happy to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving on. Knowledge can be acquired through any means possible, but it is up to us to soak in through all these means. We here at FORSE have one such medium, which is our own magazine, the Momentum. Momentum is a quarterly magazine of Operations and Supply Chain Committee of the Somaiya Institute of Management. It has readers across the world and has more than 20,000 views up until now. This quarter's publication is an international edition with this year's theme, Smart Supply Chain Navigating the Future. Let us now proceed with the release of December 2022 international edition of Momentum through this short video and have a look at its contents. Professor Balika to give each of our visitors a copy of Momentum magazine.
I look that old.
Malika sir to say a few words.
Just a few words. My question is to the audience, you, why do guys become professors? Why do people get into academics? Any guesses? Yeah, so in interesting subject, so on so forth. But I have my own theory. My theory is that because they can't talk at home, so they come here and so I just took 2-3 minutes out. I would stand between you and the judge. But very insightful talks by all the presenters. The thing about Mayur's presentation, Mayur sir's presentation was the kind of the internet-based supply chains, the key supply chain what you were talking about. So our generation, we did not have computers. 1988, I passed my engineering, and that was the year that the first computer came into SPC. Yeah, and we had to wait in the line to. But today's world is something that the kids at 1.5 years, 2 years, they are playing. They have started playing with the mobile phones, right? And 3-4 years, 5 years, they are playing with the what you can say, laptops, etc. It's very different. Our generation is a bit different. Today's your generation is different, right? And so that was the insight we got, and the kind of simulations and what you talked about was something really, it was something new even for me, right? I don't mind admitting that. Sandeep sir's presentation, I could very much relate to. You know why? Because say we teach how do you load a container, a 40 foot or 20 foot. You have the automation, you can use pallet trucks and forklifts. But that kind of automation, that kind of packaging will be suitable for countries like Europe and US. But if you want to export to Africa, you will have to send them in boxes. Right? And I was supervising the loading of these containers to Africa, and I'm just saying, how difficult is it to load a container with a box, load it on 6 feet, and manually lift it if it's around 10 kilos. These things you have to experience it. Yeah. All these things, these were the insights, right? You want to get into tech, but also learn the physical operations. Learn everything. Yeah. If you are lucky, you can learn this and then get into tech, or later whatever, or managerial thing. But at the ground level, you should know how to do all these things. Right? And Dhawal sir's, of course, presentation was very fascinating because it was very different. He gave the analogy of the human body and the supply chain. So something really very different, and I hope you can publish some research paper on that. So thank you everybody. Of course, the formal vote of thanks will be at the back end. So, but I don't know whether you will be there, so you may not be there. Whoever is not there, so I thought I would just take 2 minutes out and then thank you.
With this, we will now come to an end to our phone-in session. We thank you, Mayur sir, Sandeep sir, and Dhawal sir for a morning full of learnings. Thank you all our esteemed guests for the words of wisdom. You can now move to Govinda campus for lunch. We request everyone to reconvene post lunch at 2 p.m. The post-lunch session will begin with paper presentations, followed by a roundtable conference and a case study presentation by winners of Sanrachana. We request the hospitality team to kindly guide our guests to Govinda canteen.